how everything you believe was programmed into you. You ever stop and wonder why you believe what you believe? I'm not talking about what you say you believe. I'm talking about the stuff that runs your life without you even knowing it. The way you think success should look. The kind of partner you think you should want. What makes you feel guilty? What makes you feel proud? Even the way you define what's good or bad. Here's the part that stings. Most of it was given to you. Not chosen. Handed to you before you even had the awareness to question it. From birth. Maybe even before that. And you've been carrying it around like it's yours. Let that settle for a second, because what you believe, right now, is less about truth and more about repetition. You were raised on ideas, fed narratives, rewarded for obedience, punished for resistance. You were groomed to follow a script. Look at a toddler. They don't hate themselves. They don't care about status. They don't think they're not enough. That gets taught. Somewhere between age 0 and 12, you were slowly, methodically, trained into a certain lens. And here's the wild part. It was done by people who were programmed themselves. Parents, teachers, media, religion, culture, all repeating what they were told was the truth. So now you've got generations of conditioning layered so deep that it feels like it came from you. But it didn't. Think about it. Why do you feel guilty when you rest? Why do you chase productivity like your value depends on it? Why do you care so much what people think of you? These aren't natural instincts. These are systems. Psychological leashes disguised as morality. And most people never even notice them. They wake up, scroll social media, compare their lives to filtered highlights, then wonder why they feel behind. They chase a career path because it looks impressive, not because it's meaningful. They date people who look good on paper, but make them feel nothing. They silence their gut and call it maturity, all while claiming they're free. But freedom without awareness is just a prettier cage. And I know what some people will say. Well, not everything is programmed. I've made my own decisions. I think for myself. Sure, but here's the question you're not asking. Who built the framework that defines what those decisions even mean? You picked your clothes today. Great. But the part of your brain that thinks what's cool or what looks good, where did that come from? You chose your career. Fine. But what made you think a career equals worth? Where did you learn that if you don't make 6 figures by 30, you're failing? None of these thoughts came out of nowhere. They were installed, like software, through repetition, through approval, through shame. You ever notice how schools don't teach you how to think, just what to think? Memorize, obey, regurgitate, raise your hand to speak, ask permission to use the bathroom. That's not education. That's behavioral conditioning. It's not about knowledge. It's about compliance. And by the time you graduate, you're not a thinker. You're a performer, performing identity, performing success, performing like you've got it all figured out. But deep down, you're just hoping nobody notices you're improvising the whole damn thing. This is why people break down in their 30s. Midlife crises aren't a mystery. They're a delayed realization that the life you built was based on someone else's blueprint. And once the illusion wears off, you start seeing the cracks. You were taught what to want before you knew what you needed. You were told who to be before you knew who you were. That's not growth, that's indoctrination. And the system loves it that way. Because a man who thinks for himself is dangerous. A man who asks why is a problem. A man who rewrites his own beliefs doesn't need approval. He becomes immune to it. And if you can't be shamed, bribed, or guilt-tripped into obedience, then you're not useful to a system built on control. So they teach you to police yourself, to shame your desires, to fear rejection. They hand you a checklist of what a good life should look like and dare you to question it. And if you do, you're rebellious, you're selfish, you're ungrateful. But here's the truth. You're not crazy for feeling empty. You're not wrong for questioning the path. You're not broken because the default settings don't work for you. That discomfort you feel, that itch that something is off, it's not a flaw, it's the signal that your programming is cracking. That maybe, just maybe, the voice in your head that doubts, questions, resists, is actually you. And the voice that shames, pressures, and lectures is everything you've absorbed that isn't. You are not your beliefs. You are the one who can observe them, challenge them, replace them. But you have to be willing to sit in the discomfort of realizing how much of your identity isn't really yours. You have to be brave enough to unlearn, to strip it all back and ask, if I wasn't told who to be, who would I become? And most people never go there, because it's terrifying to admit you've been living someone else's life. But what's worse? Spending the rest of it defending a lie, just because it's familiar. If you want to be free, like actually free, you're going to have to break your own programming. Not with rebellion, not with rage, but with ruthless honesty, with curiosity, with the courage to say, I don't know who I am yet, but I'm damn sure gonna find out. And once you taste that clarity, you'll never unsee it. The financial system is designed to keep you in debt. All right, let's not waste time sugarcoating it. You're not failing with money. You're not bad at budgeting. You're not undisciplined, lazy, or dumb. You're playing a rigged game, and the house loves that you blame yourself. See, the system wasn't built to help you build wealth. It was built to trap you in the illusion of wealth while quietly draining you every step of the way. That's not an accident. That's the design. Let me walk you through it. But you gotta stay awake for this one. From the second you're old enough to earn a paycheck, you're targeted. Credit card offers in the mail, student loans that promise freedom, car loans that get you approved in minutes. You're sold a dream access, convenience, luxury, without delay. But what they don't tell you is that what you're signing up for isn't freedom. It's financial servitude. Debt is the leash, and it's invisible because they've done such a good job normalizing it, you barely question it. You just assume it's part of life. That's the trap. You finance a college degree with interest. You buy a car with interest. You get a mortgage with interest. You carry credit card balances with interest. You're charged fees for being too poor and charged more fees for trying to escape being poor. And the interest is where they bleed you. Let's be real. A $1,500 couch ends up costing $2,500 over time. A student loan for $40,000 can take 20 years to pay off and cost double. You might be paying 5 figures in credit card payments every year and still owe the same amount. But the banks, they get paid whether you win or lose. They want you to stay just uncomfortable enough to keep working, but not uncomfortable enough to fight back. They want you locked into that paycheck to paycheck cycle, because as long as you're busy surviving, you're not asking deeper questions, like why does money even work this way? Why are we taught how to solve for X, but never how to build a business? Why are credit scores more important than financial literacy? Why is the system obsessed with keeping you a borrower, not an owner? Because if you own, you have power, and power doesn't feed the machine. See, banks don't make money from people who save. They make it from people who owe. Every missed payment, every late fee, every high-interest charge, that's revenue. Your stress is their bottom line. And this isn't conspiracy. This is math. The average American carries over $90,000 in debt, not counting a mortgage. And most of that is wrapped up in things that depreciate in value the moment you get them. Meanwhile, wages have been mostly flat, and inflation keeps rising. So what happens? You work harder. You take on side gigs. You hustle. But somehow it still feels like quicksand. Like the more you try to climb out, the deeper you sink. That's not a lack of effort. That's a system designed to feed off your effort. Now here's the part that really punches you in the gut. They've trained you to feel ashamed of your situation. You're in debt. Be quiet. You must be irresponsible. You're struggling with bills. Try harder. Stop buying coffee. As if a $4 latte is what's wrecking your financial life. You feel stuck. That's your fault. Be more disciplined. Hustle harder. Sleep less. It's emotional manipulation. Financial gaslighting. They keep you chasing the dream while selling you the chains. And then they distract you with shiny things. New phones. Flashy cars. Lifestyle marketing that makes you feel behind if you're not spending. You think you're making choices. But the truth is, your desires are being engineered. Your insecurities are being monetized. And your self-worth is being tied to things that drain your net worth. And when you try to break free, it's uphill. Try getting ahead without debt when the cost of living outpaces your income. Try building wealth when saving earns less than inflation. Try investing when you were never taught how, but told it's too risky. Meanwhile, billion-dollar companies get bailouts. They lose billions and get rescued. You miss a bill and get wrecked. The system is not broken. It's working exactly as intended. It gives just enough to keep you running, never enough to stop. And if you stop, you fall behind. You lose your credit score. You lose access. You lose everything the system pretended to give you. And that's the final twist. They convince you to fight for the very system that's draining you. You defend the banks. You mock people who talk about financial independence. You work harder for jobs that exploit you. You tell yourself debt is normal. Struggle is noble. Ownership is greedy. But deep down, you know something's off. You know you're not supposed to be this exhausted all the time. You know it doesn't make sense that you work 40, 50, 60 hours a week and still feel broke. You know you were meant for more than just getting by. And you're right. But the first step isn't just working harder. It's seeing the system for what it really is, and refusing to play by its rules blindly. Because once you see it, really see it, you stop blaming yourself. You start learning the game. You stop consuming just to cope. You start building with intention. You stop being the product and start becoming the player. The real meaning of conspiracy theory. Let's get something straight. The phrase conspiracy theory doesn't mean what you think it means. It's not about crazy people in basements connecting dots that aren't there. It's not about aliens or lizard people or whatever cartoonish version the media trained you to picture. That image you have in your head, that wasn't accidental. That was installed. On purpose. So you'd never take the real stuff seriously. Because here's what the phrase actually means at its core. A conspiracy theory is just the belief that powerful people might work together in secret to protect their own interests, that they might lie to the public, that they might create narratives, that they might cover things up. Think about that. Is that really so far-fetched? You're telling me billion-dollar corporations, global governments, intelligence agencies, and private elites might not always be transparent and honest? That maybe, just maybe, there's more going on behind the curtain than what's shown to you on the news. But the moment someone says it out loud, they get slapped with that label. Conspiracy theorist. Boom, conversation over. And that's exactly how it was designed to work. See, that term isn't neutral anymore. It's a psychological trigger. Not to spark thought, but to shut it down. The second it comes up, people tune out. They stop listening. They stop thinking. Doesn't matter how reasonable the point is, doesn't matter if there's evidence, doesn't even matter if it's already happened before. The term acts like a mental firewall. And now, the person asking the hard questions is suddenly crazy, dangerous, or delusional. You want to know when this all shifted. It wasn't random. Back in the 60s, when people started questioning the official story of the JFK assassination, the government didn't like how many folks weren't buying it. So the CIA literally encouraged media outlets to use the term conspiracy theory to discredit dissent. This isn't guesswork. It's documented. They weaponized the label so that anyone skeptical of the official narrative could be painted as irrational or extreme. And the media ran with it. They trained you to hear the term and instantly think ridiculous, irresponsible, unreliable. But here's the thing. Real conspiracies exist. They always have. Watergate was a conspiracy. The Tuskegee experiments were a conspiracy. The NSA's mass surveillance program was a conspiracy theory until it got exposed. The tobacco industry covering up cancer links, the financial collapse in 2008, corporate lobbying, illegal wars based on lies, conspiracies. And yet every single one of them was laughed at before it was proven true. Every one of them started with someone being called paranoid or radical. Funny how that works. This is what happens over and over. The same pattern. Something big happens. A few people start asking questions that make others uncomfortable. They get labeled, marginalized, silenced. Years later, documents leak. Whistleblowers emerge. History books catch up, and the truth comes out. Just late enough that no one gets punished. Just late enough that most people have moved on. So they get away with it. And the next time it happens, the cycle repeats, and people still act like it's crazy to think that those in power might be working together behind the scenes. It's not crazy. It's logical. Power protects itself. Influence operates in shadows. And if you think people with billions of dollars and access to media, legal teams, and political networks aren't using that to their advantage, you're not thinking. You're trusting. Blindly. And that's exactly what they want. The irony is this. Being called a conspiracy theorist today often just means you were paying attention too early. You saw the pattern before the masses were ready to admit it. And because you weren't waiting for permission to think, you got mocked. That's the cost of awareness in a society addicted to comfort. Most people would rather feel safe in a lie than uncomfortable with the truth. And let's be honest, most people don't even want to know. Because knowing means responsibility. Knowing means maybe they've been fooled. Maybe they've been defending something that never cared about them. Maybe their whole worldview needs a reset. And that's terrifying. So instead of thinking critically, They cling to whatever makes them feel stable. They point fingers. They shame the questioners. They follow the crowd. Because deep down, they're afraid of what happens if the curtain actually gets pulled back. But ask yourself, since when did skepticism become dangerous? Since when did it become wrong to question authority? When did we start treating trust without evidence as a virtue and doubt with logic as a threat? When did asking why turn into a red flag? Here's the truth. The phrase conspiracy theory has been hijacked. It doesn't mean irrational. It means inconvenient. It means you asked something you weren't supposed to. It means you saw past the illusion too early. And the system can't have that. So they mock you. They isolate you. They make you doubt your own sanity. Not because you're wrong, but because you're getting too close. And once you understand that, the game changes. You stop worrying about labels. You stop needing approval. You stop apologizing for thinking deeper. And you start realizing that maybe the most dangerous thing isn't the theory itself. It's the fact that we were taught not to ask in the first place. How social media is engineered for psychological control. You ever catch yourself opening an app without even thinking about it? You're just standing in line or waiting at a red light or sitting on the toilet and boom, your thumb is already scrolling. No thought, no intention, just autopilot. And you didn't decide to check it. It decided to check you. Now think about that. You think you're using social media, but most of the time, it's using you. That's not exaggeration. That's not drama. That's design. Because the truth is, none of these apps were made to connect you. That's the story they told. The real purpose is to hook you, hold you, and harvest your attention for profit. Period. The longer you're on, the more ads they can show. The more ads they show, the more money they make. So the game becomes simple. Keep you addicted. Keep you anxious. Keep you chasing a high you never fully catch. And it's not random. It's not passive. It's psychological warfare built into your daily routine. Let me break it down. You know that little red notification bubble. That thing's not read by accident. Red triggers urgency. Action. A part of your brain sees it and feels incomplete until it clicks. Same with endless scroll. There's no stopping point. No natural end. It's modeled after slot machines. Keep pulling the lever. One more scroll. One more hit of dopamine. Every like, every comment, every tag. It's a reward loop. And the scary part is, your brain doesn't treat it like information. It treats it like validation, like identity. You're not just scrolling through posts. You're scrolling through signals of social survival. Do they like me? Am I seen? Am I relevant? Am I safe? Now imagine that 10, 20, 50 times a day. That's not casual use. That's conditioning. And if you think this stuff just happened, let me clear that up. Some of the smartest minds in behavioral psychology, neuroscience, and AI work at these companies. They know exactly how your brain works. They know when your willpower is low. They know how long your average session is. They know what triggers you, what soothes you, what enrages you. They don't just build features. They build responses. You think you're choosing what to see, but the algorithm chooses for you. And it's not neutral. It's not just giving you what you like. It's giving you what keeps you locked in. And what does that? Outrage, envy, jealousy, tribal conflict, social comparison, content that makes you feel something strong and addictive. That's what gets pushed to the top. Not what's true. Not what's healthy. What keeps you engaged? And here's where it gets darker. Over time, You're not just seeing the world through your feed. You're feeling it through the emotional distortion that feed creates. You start thinking everyone's better looking, more successful, more popular. You start feeling like you're behind, like you're not enough. And your brain, without even realizing it, starts adjusting your worldview based on what's profitable for a company, not what's real. That's not influence. That's psychological control. Let me put it this way. If a stranger followed you around in real life whispering comparisons in your ear all day, you'd call that abusive. But when a device does it, you call it normal. You even reach for it voluntarily. That's how deep the manipulation goes. Even your emotions are being used as data points. Your pauses, your replays, your clicks, your hesitations. Every little movement is tracked and fed into a system that refines what to show you next to make you stay just a little bit longer. And it works. Because you're not just seeing content. You're seeing a reflection of the parts of you that can be most easily exploited. And if you've ever tried to quit or take a break, you already know. It fights back. You get restless, bored, anxious, like something's missing. That's not boredom. That's withdrawal. Your brain literally starts craving the dopamine patterns you've been feeding it. And just when you think you're back in control, something pulls you in again. Maybe it's a trending video. Maybe it's a message. Maybe it's just that itch in your hand to check what you might have missed. And once you're in, it's like time disappears. You look up and it's 30 minutes later. You don't even remember what you saw. And here's the most dangerous part of all. Over time, you stop noticing it. It just becomes part of life, part of your routine. You don't question the influence because you don't even feel it happening anymore. But it's there, shaping your attention, your mood, your relationships, your sense of reality. And that's not hyperbole. That's behavioral science. When you control input, you shape perception. And when you shape perception, you shape the world people think they live in. So no, social media didn't just become addictive by accident. It was built like a casino. Except this one's in your pocket. And instead of money, you gamble with your time, your peace, your focus, and your mind. The truth is you're not the customer. You're the product. Your attention is the currency. And your behavior is the asset they trade. Now here's the question you've got to ask yourself. If something this powerful is free and engineered to keep you from walking away, then how much of your reality is actually yours? How media manufactures consent. You probably think you know what's going on in the world. You've got a phone in your hand. You see headlines every day. You watch the news. You scroll through trending stories. You feel informed. But what if I told you that most of what you believe about politics, conflict, culture, even history, didn't come from truth? It came from repetition. Because here's what most people never realize: the media doesn't just report what happens. It decides how it happens. What gets shown. What gets left out. What becomes the headline. And what quietly disappears. This isn't about facts. It's about framing. And once you control the frame, you don't have to lie. You just have to select. Now take a second and think about that. If you saw the exact same event, but I told one version with a sad piano track, close-up faces, and words like tragedy and crisis, and I told another version with heroic music, strong symbols, and words like justice and defense, you'd walk away with two completely different realities. Same event, two stories. That's power. That's narrative control. And this isn't some fringe opinion. It's a documented, deliberate strategy. There's a reason why the most influential media voices tend to repeat the same phrases over and over. War on terror. Weapons of mass destruction. Safe and effective. Democracy under threat. Misinformation. These phrases don't just inform. They program. They shape what you feel before you even ask if it's true. Most people don't read past the headline. They don't dig deeper. They don't check sources, and the media knows that. So they speak in half-truths and headlines, knowing that the emotional impression is stronger than the actual content. You remember how it made you feel, not what it actually said. And here's where it gets darker. You think the media is about informing you. But more often than not, it's about priming you, prepping your mind to accept certain ideas so that, when the real agenda shows up, you don't resist. You comply. You consent. Not because you understood the facts, but because the story made you feel like it was the right thing to do. This is what Noam Chomsky called manufacturing consent. And it's not a metaphor. It's a process. First, they tell you who the villain is. Then they show you how dangerous that villain is. Then they give you the solution. And if you hesitate, if you question the story, they don't argue with facts. They hit you with shame, guilt, fear, social pressure. Be a good citizen. Do your part. Trust the experts. Support the current thing. It's psychological herding. Get enough people moving in the same emotional direction, and the few who break formation start to feel crazy. Alone. Wrong. That's the trick. They don't need to convince everyone. They just need to isolate the voices that refuse to clap. And it works. War gets justified. Censorship gets welcomed. Corruption gets ignored. All because the story was told the right way. All because the words were chosen carefully. All because the image, the tone, the framing was engineered to make you feel less like a thinker and more like a believer. Now here's the part they don't want you to notice. Look at who owns the media. Look at the corporate ties, the government contracts, the revolving doors between journalism and politics. You think that's a coincidence? You think you're hearing neutral reporting when the very people writing the news have deep financial and political interests in what you believe. Media doesn't just reflect power. It protects it, it sells it, and if telling the full truth threatens that power, the truth gets edited, buried, rewritten. Ask yourself this: how many times have you seen a massive story break, real evidence, real scandal, and then within days it vanishes? No follow-up, no outrage, just silence. Like it never happened. Meanwhile, other stories, trivial ones, performative ones, get hammered into your head for weeks. That's not journalism. That's distraction. That's narrative management. They don't have to burn books anymore. They just flood you with noise, confusion, fear, and then spoon-feed you the version of reality that benefits them. The most effective propaganda is the kind that doesn't look like propaganda. It looks like news. It looks like concern. It looks like moral clarity. It looks like the responsible adult voice in the room, calmly telling you what to believe. And the scariest part is, most people will defend it. They'll repeat it. They'll fight you over it. Not because they understand it, but because they've been emotionally attached to the story. And now, questioning the story feels like questioning themselves. That's the trap. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The way headlines manipulate emotion. The way debates are framed with no real middle. The way certain words are weaponized to shut down thought. Conspiracy, misinformation, extremist, anti-something. You hear those words and your brain turns off. That's not education. That's control. So here's the uncomfortable truth. If the only version of the world you've ever seen is the one they chose to show you, how do you even know what you believe is real? That question alone is dangerous. And that's exactly why they never want you to ask it. Truth doesn't sell. That's why you don't hear it. Let's be real. The truth. It's boring. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't scream. It doesn't spike your dopamine. It doesn't sell. And that's exactly why you barely ever hear it. See, most people think the media, the influencers, the institutions, they're out here spreading lies on purpose. And yeah, sometimes that happens. But the deeper problem is more subtle, more dangerous. It's that the truth doesn't perform. It doesn't trigger you. It doesn't trend, so it gets ignored. Quietly, systematically. And in its place, we get whatever version of reality pulls the most emotion out of you. Because in today's world, attention is money. It's oxygen. It's power. And truth, with all its nuance and complexity and quiet discomfort, just can't compete with outrage, or fear, or drama, or tribal validation. Truth is slow, it's gray, it forces you to pause and think. But algorithms aren't built for thinking. They're built for reacting. Think about it. If you see a headline that says everything is mostly fine, what do? You scroll past it. But if it says the world is collapsing, or that someone like you is under attack, or that your side is winning and the other side is evil, you click, you comment, you share, and that one click tells the machine to give you more of that. And it's not just media companies chasing views. It's politicians chasing votes, brands chasing sales, creators chasing followers. Everybody's in a race to weaponize your emotion, not your logic, not your values, not your curiosity. Just the raw animal part of you that gets hooked when you're scared or angry or flattered. That's why most people have no idea what's actually happening in the world. They just know how they feel about it. Because what they're being fed isn't information. It's stimulation. It's content designed to keep them locked in a loop of emotional highs and lows that never lead to clarity. Just more noise, and the truth, that gets left in the corner. No spotlight. No drama. Just waiting for someone who still cares enough to slow down and look. But here's where it gets even more twisted. The people who try to speak the truth, they don't get rewarded. They get punished. Because truth, real truth, it doesn't flatter anybody. It challenges you. It makes you uncomfortable. It forces you to see where you might be wrong, where you might be part of the problem. And most people can't handle that. So instead of listening, they attack, they label, they cancel. They run back to the noise that makes them feel good. And what does that do? It trains everyone else to stay quiet, to play it safe, to go with the flow. Because why take the hit if people don't want truth anyway? Why speak up when all it gets you is backlash and lost followers? So now you've got a system where everyone's pretending. Influencers pretend they know. News anchors pretend they care. Politicians pretend they're honest. And audiences pretend they're informed. But it's all performance. It's all market-tested messaging dressed up like truth. And if you try to pull the curtain back, you get called negative, cynical, a conspiracy theorist. You get told you're thinking too much, or not trusting enough, or causing problems. But the truth doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your political party. It doesn't care about likes or followers. It just is. And most people can't stomach that, because they've been trained not to want truth, just comfort, just confirmation, just whatever makes the chaos make sense for a few more hours. But the cost of that is massive, because a society that doesn't value truth becomes easy to manipulate. You can sell them anything. You can scare them into anything. You can distract them with shiny nonsense while their freedom, their peace, their future quietly gets sold off piece by piece. And they won't even notice, because they're too busy scrolling. That's the real danger. Not that people are being lied to, but that they've lost the appetite for what's real. They want sugar, not substance. They want dopamine, not depth. They want to be entertained, not awakened. And the system knows it. So it feeds you what keeps you passive, divided, addicted, loud on the surface but silent underneath. It rewards emotional noise and punishes intellectual courage. And slowly, you stop even remembering what truth feels like. But here's the wild part. The moment you start craving truth again, really craving it, not as entertainment, but as something to build your life on, everything changes. You start noticing the manipulation. You start seeing through the noise. You start asking questions that make people uncomfortable. And yeah, it's lonely at first, because most people are still asleep. But it's also powerful, because the minute you stop needing to be popular or validated or emotionally coddled, you become dangerous to the machine. You become someone it can't predict, can't control, can't sell to. And in a world where truth is buried under 10,000 distractions, being someone who still seeks it, that's rare, that's radical, and that might be the bravest thing you ever do. Escaping the matrix, what that really looks like. People love to talk about escaping the matrix like it's some cool aesthetic. Like you just wake up one day, unplug, start eating grass-fed beef, hit the gym twice a day, get rich off crypto, and suddenly you're free. But that's not how it works, not even close. The real matrix isn't a system you can see. It's a system you feel. It's invisible because it lives in your decisions, your fears, your habits, and most of all, your beliefs. Escaping it doesn't look like rebellion. It looks like isolation, like discomfort, like realizing almost everything you were taught to value is keeping you docile, compliant, and disconnected from your actual potential. See, escaping the matrix starts with a breakdown, a glitch. That moment when something doesn't sit right anymore. You're at your job, and you realize no matter how hard you work, you'll never really be free. You're watching the news, and something about the way they talk to you feels off, like it's scripted. You're scrolling social media, and you catch yourself comparing your life to someone who's faking theirs. And then you ask a dangerous question. What if the life I've been living wasn't mine? That's where it starts. Not with money, not with fame, not with followers, with disillusionment. The truth always begins by destroying a version of you that was built on lies. Now here's the part no one tells you. The matrix doesn't chase you. It waits for you to crawl back. Because the moment you step out of it, life gets harder. You don't get the same validation. You don't get the same dopamine hits. You stop fitting in. People start calling you weird, negative, crazy. You stop being entertained by what everyone else is addicted to, and that makes you feel alone. That's the test. Because freedom doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like loss. Like boredom, like rejection, like standing outside in the cold with nothing to lean on but your own will. When you're in the matrix, everything is provided for you: structure, identity, status, meaning. It's all prepackaged. You just plug in and play the role. But when you step out, You have to build all of that yourself. That's why most people don't make it. Not because they're weak, because they're still addicted to comfort. Escaping the matrix means you start thinking for yourself. Sounds nice, right? But do you know how uncomfortable it is to think something different than everyone around you? To stop repeating what your friends repeat, to stop parroting what you heard online, to say, "I don't know," and actually mean it. That's not rebellion. That's maturity. That's ownership, but it's rare. You start eating different, moving different, spending different, speaking different, and people notice. They mock it. Not because you're wrong, but because you represent the version of them that knows they're not living honestly. You become a mirror they don't want to look into. Escaping the matrix is not about finding secret knowledge. It's about unlearning the programming. Like the idea that success means a big house and a fancy car, when all it really means is owning your time. Like the idea that being informed means repeating headlines, when real intelligence starts with curiosity, not certainty. Like the idea that fitting in is the goal, when most of what you're trying to fit into is broken. Here's the irony. The Matrix sells you the dream of freedom while keeping you on a leash. It tells you to chase happiness while flooding your brain with things that make you miserable. It tells you to be yourself while punishing you every time you don't follow the script. So when you start unplugging, you start noticing how much of your life was shaped by fear. Fear of not being liked. Fear of missing out. Fear of failure. Fear of being judged. And once you stop letting fear run the show, you stop playing by the rules you never agreed to in the first place. And what comes after that? That's where it gets interesting. Because after the discomfort, the withdrawal, the silence, comes clarity. You stop needing noise to feel alive. You stop craving permission. You stop outsourcing your worth. And you start moving with something very few people ever find: inner authority. Not ego, not arrogance, just the quiet knowing that you don't need to be validated to be right. You don't need to be famous to be successful. You don't need to be seen to be real. And when you get there, when you finally look around and realize you are no longer asleep, you start to see the Matrix for what it always was: a game, a loop, a story, and you're no longer a character in it. You're the writer. Your attention is the most valuable commodity on earth. You probably think the most valuable things in the world are things you can touch: gold, oil, real estate, maybe data, maybe time. But it's none of those. The most valuable commodity on earth is your attention. And it's not even close. Look around. Everything is fighting for it. Your phone, your apps, your notifications, your job, your friends, the media, your bank, the government, the ads, the influencers. They all want the same thing: your attention. Because once they have that, they can do anything else they want. They can sell you, scare you, distract you, influence your choices without you even realizing it. And the wild part is, they do not need to control your body. They just need to guide your focus, because wherever your attention goes, your life follows. That is the secret. And it is not a theory. It is the business model of the modern world. You think social media is free. You think search engines, email, entertainment, all of it is just some digital miracle out of goodwill. No, you are the product: your time, your eyeballs, your clicks. That is what is being bought and sold behind the scenes every single second. And the price is going up, because there is only so much human attention to go around. It is finite, scarce, precious, and everyone wants a piece. But it gets darker. Because the battle for your attention is not a fair fight. They are not just asking politely. They are hijacking you, your biology, your psychology, your habits. They are studying what makes you stop scrolling, what makes you rage, what makes you feel seen, what makes you feel FOMO. And then they feed it to you, on a loop, until your brain forgets how to sit still, until you do not even notice you are addicted. There is a reason you cannot get through a meal without checking your phone. There is a reason you feel phantom vibrations that never happened. There is a reason your screen time keeps climbing even though you swear you are trying to cut back. This is not laziness. It is design. It is engineering. It is a billion-dollar arms race to capture more of your mental bandwidth, one dopamine hit at a time. And what do you lose in the process? You lose depth. You lose focus. You lose the space where real thought happens. You lose your own internal compass. Because when your attention is constantly being pulled outward, you stop hearing yourself. You stop creating. You stop choosing. You just react. You know that feeling when hours go by and you have no idea what you did with your day. That is not an accident. That is the system working exactly as intended, because distracted people are easy to control, easy to sell to, easy to pacify. They do not resist. They just consume, they just comply. And here is the trap: it does not feel like control. It feels like choice. You think you are choosing what you click, what you watch, what you read. But most of the time, your attention has already been steered. Through algorithms, through headlines, through targeted emotion. You are not exploring anymore. You are being led. And while all that is happening, while your focus is scattered across 1,000 shiny things, the real stuff that matters gets ignored. Your health, your relationships, your purpose, your inner voice, all of that gets pushed to the background because none of it can compete with the noise. But here is the power you still have, the moment you take back control of your attention. Even a little bit, you start to remember who you are, what you actually care about, what brings peace, what builds momentum, what matters in the long run instead of the next 5 minutes. And that is dangerous, because a focused mind is not just more productive. It is harder to manipulate. You become less reactive, less emotionally hijacked, less easy to steer, and the people who depend on your distraction, they start losing grip, because now you are not doom scrolling. You are building. You are not passively consuming opinions. You are thinking for yourself. You are not letting the loudest voice in the room own your day. You are choosing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. And if enough people do that, the whole system cracks, because the economy of attention only works when you give it away without thinking. So if you are wondering why everything feels louder, faster, more overwhelming, it is not just you. It is a war, a silent one, not for your money, not for your vote, but for your focus. And every moment you give away without awareness, you are feeding it. But every moment you keep, that you hold and direct with intention, that is you stepping out of the loop. That is you becoming sovereign again. And the world does not know what to do with a mind that cannot be bought. The illusion of choice in politics and consumerism. You ever notice how you're always being told you have a choice? Like that's supposed to make you feel powerful. Left or right, this brand or that one. Pick a side, pick a flavor, pick a package. And on the surface, yeah, it looks like freedom. But look closer, and you'll start to see it's not freedom at all. It's a game. And the game was rigged before you even showed up. Let's start with politics. They hand you two options. maybe 3 if they're feeling generous. And they act like those are the only paths forward. But what if both sides are playing for the same system? What if they're just 2 faces of the same coin, flipping back and forth to make you think you're in control, while nothing fundamental ever changes? Every election, you get told this is the most important vote of your life. Every time, they say the other side is evil, a threat to everything good. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, both parties keep the same power structures in place. They still pass bills for corporate interests. They still fund the same wars. They still bail out the same broken systems. The theater changes, but the story stays the same. That's not choice. That's managed perception. It's designed to make you emotionally invested in a system that already decided the outcome. You're not voting for change. You're voting for the illusion that change is even on the menu. And it doesn't stop with politics. Consumerism works the exact same way. You walk into a store or open your phone, and it feels like you have infinite options. This brand, that brand. These sneakers, those sneakers. But look a little deeper, and you'll find out most of those brands are owned by the same handful of companies. The differences are surface, level, packaging, logo, target audience, but the product, the supply chain, the profit, goes back to the same giant parent company. So you're not choosing. You're selecting from a list someone else wrote. That's not freedom. That's a controlled buffet. You feel like a king picking from the platter, but you never got to question who cooked the food or what's actually in it. That's the real trick. The system never had to take away your freedom. It just had to narrow your field of vision, to keep you so distracted by picking between option A and option B that you never stop to ask, why are these the only options? Who benefits from me being this distracted? Who profits from me feeling like I'm making a choice, while they make the only one that counts? And here's where it gets deeper. When you grow up inside a system that constantly offers you fake choices, you start to internalize that as reality. You stop looking for what's real. You start believing that life is just about choosing the lesser evil, that you're stuck, that your job, your lifestyle, your beliefs, all of it, are just how things are. But they're not. That job you hate, that debt cycle you're in, that political fight you feel trapped in, that constant urge to buy something new just to feel alive. None of that is natural. It was designed. It was programmed into you by a culture that needs you confused and compliant. Because confused people are easier to manage. People who think they're free are less likely to rebel. And people who think their only power is in choosing between 2 bad options will never try to build a third. So what does real choice look like? It looks like stepping back far enough to question the structure itself. Not just who's in charge of the system, but why the system exists the way it does. Real choice is not picking a new face for the same machine. It's walking away from the machine altogether. It's deciding to think, eat, vote, spend, and live on your terms, not the ones handed to you. But that's uncomfortable, because real choice means real responsibility. It means you don't get to blame the system anymore. You don't get to say, well, that's just how the world works. You have to actually decide who you want to be and what you want your life to stand for. And most people are not ready for that. So they stay in the loop, picking their preferred flavor of control and calling it freedom. But once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you feel that gut-level realization that your choices have been curated by people who do not care about your growth, You wake up, and that's where it all begins. Not by choosing differently, by realizing you were never really choosing at all. Why the 9-to-5 life is a modern control mechanism. They told you it was normal. Wake up early, fight traffic, sit at a desk under artificial lights, work 8 hours, go home exhausted, repeat until retirement. That's just how it works. That's life. But what if that entire system, what we call the 9-to-5, is not about productivity or progress at all? What if it was never designed to set you free, but to keep you in place? The 9-to-5 was not built for your well-being. It was built for predictability, for control, to turn you into something measurable, a cog in a giant machine. It trains you to obey the clock, follow routine, and hand over your most energetic hours to someone else, for just enough money to keep you showing up again tomorrow. And yeah, you get a lunch break, maybe some benefits, a 2-week vacation if you're lucky. But think about it. Out of your entire year, how much of it is actually yours? How much time do you really control? How much of your energy goes into building your life instead of someone else's? It gets even worse when you realize how early this system starts. From the time you're a kid, you're trained to sit still, follow bells, ask permission to speak, memorize what you're told, and get rewarded for compliance. School doesn't prepare you to think. It prepares you to obey, to tolerate boredom, to get used to being managed. So by the time you enter the workforce, you're already conditioned to accept a life where your time is not your own. They sell it to you as stability. They tell you to get a job, any job, just be grateful. They tell you this is what responsible people do. But behind the curtain, what they're really selling is quiet desperation. The kind where you look forward to Friday just to escape the prison they put you in Monday through Friday. The kind where your only dreams are to retire early or win the lottery, because you can't even imagine freedom without escape. And here's the dark part. Most people are so deep in it. They defend the very thing that's draining them. They laugh about it. They bond over it. They complain about work like it's just the weather, something no one can change. Misery becomes a shared language. You hate your boss, your commute, your schedule, but you keep doing it because everyone else is doing it. And if you stop, what does that make you? It makes you dangerous. Because once you start to question the system, you start to see how much of your life has been leased out. You traded your time for money, then traded your money for relief. You bought things to feel better about losing your freedom. The house, the car, the streaming, the fast food, the weekend drinks. It all becomes a cycle to numb the realization that deep down you feel trapped. But here's the trick. They never had to force you into it. All they had to do was make the alternative look scary. Tell you that if you don't follow the path, you'll be broke, unstable, unimportant. Tell you chasing your own thing is risky, that freedom is irresponsible, that doing what you love is naive. So instead, you accept a paycheck for your obedience and call it success. But is it? What good is money if you have no time to enjoy it? What good is a promotion if it costs you your health, your relationships, your peace? What good is a job title if you have to hide who you really are just to keep it? Now, this is not about quitting your job tomorrow or pretending work is evil. Work can be meaningful, purposeful, but the problem is when work becomes your identity. When you no longer question whether this routine you're in is helping you grow, or just keeping you too busy to notice you stopped living. Because that's the point of the 9-to-5, not just to keep you working. but to keep you distracted, so you don't start asking deeper questions. Like, what kind of life would I create if I had my time back? What would I pursue if I wasn't constantly tired? What could I build if I wasn't always stuck in survival mode? The truth is, most people are not lazy. They're just exhausted. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And the system depends on that exhaustion. Because tired people don't rebel. Tired people don't dream. Tired people just cope. But once you realize this, you can start to take the power back. Bit by bit. You can stop worshiping the grind. You can protect your energy. You can use the system without letting it use you. You can build something of your own, even if it starts small. And once you get even a taste of that freedom, real, soul-level freedom, not just time off, but time you own, everything changes. Because now, you're no longer just working a job. You're building a life. Waking up hurts. The psychological toll of awareness. Nobody tells you this part. Everyone talks about waking up like it's some kind of spiritual high. Like you open your eyes one day, see the truth, and suddenly you're free, enlightened, above it all. But here's the truth most people will never say out loud. Waking up hurts. It hurts more than anything. And once it starts, there's no going back. The moment you really start to see things for what they are, not what you were told they are, it shakes you to the core. You start noticing how fake the smiles are, how shallow the conversations feel, how everyone seems to be playing a part in a story they never wrote. You walk through life like a ghost, watching people chase things they do not even question anymore. The job, the image, the followers, the next dopamine hit, and you're just standing there thinking, am I the only one seeing this? That is where the pain begins. Because awareness disconnects you. You are no longer plugged into the collective fantasy. You no longer get to enjoy the comfort of ignorance. You see the manipulation, the conditioning, the lies dressed as normal life. And even though you wish you could unsee it, you can't. And it is lonely, deeply lonely. Not because people are bad, but because most of them are asleep, and they want to stay that way. They are not ready to question everything. They are not ready to feel the weight of truth. So when you bring it up, they shut down. They mock it. They defend the very system that keeps them numb. And you're left sitting there, surrounded by people, but feeling more alone than ever. It messes with your identity. Because so much of who you thought you were was based on false inputs, beliefs you inherited, values you absorbed, goals you chased just to be accepted. But now you see they were never really yours. They were planted in you, and that realization rips away the mask. But it doesn't hand you a new one. You are just exposed, raw, stripped of all the old answers. That's when the depression creeps in. The existential kind. The kind that whispers, if this is all fake, then what's the point? What do I hold on to now? What is even real? And you go through that internal war. Between the part of you that wants to go back to sleep and the part that knows it's too late. See, the truth doesn't bring comfort at first. It brings destruction. It burns down everything that was built on illusion. Your relationships, your routines, your beliefs, sometimes even your sense of self. And in that fire, you lose people. You lose old dreams. You lose the version of you that used to feel at home in the matrix. But here's the thing, that pain, it's not a flaw in the process. It is the process. Growth starts with grief, because the old you has to die for the real you to emerge. And death is never clean. It's messy. It's chaotic. It breaks you open in ways you didn't know were possible. But that breaking, that's where the light gets in. You start realizing that awareness is not about having all the answers. It's about being willing to face the questions, to sit in the discomfort, to stop running from the truth just because it's inconvenient. Because even though it hurts, it's real. And there is a strange kind of peace that comes from finally being able to say, I may be in pain, but at least I am awake. Eventually, the chaos slows down. You start rebuilding, not with illusions this time, but with intention. You start forming relationships that are based on truth, not performance. You stop chasing things just because everyone else is. You start listening to your own inner compass instead of external noise. And slowly, the pain transforms. It becomes clarity, strength, power. But none of that happens without first being shattered. And that is the part they do not glamorize. The part where you are curled up at night wondering if this path was a mistake. The part where you question everything and everyone, including yourself. That's real awakening. Not the highlight reel version. The brutal, beautiful, soul-forging truth. So if you are in that space right now, where nothing makes sense, where everything feels heavy, just know you are not broken. You are becoming. And what you are becoming is someone the system cannot control. Because once you go through the pain of waking up, you become immune to the old tricks. The cheap rewards. The shallow promises. The false sense of safety. You start living with eyes wide open. And even though that means seeing the darkness, it also means you get to see the light. Clearly, for the first time. Not everyone will understand your journey. That's okay. They're not supposed to. This path was never meant to be easy. It was meant to be real. Why most people would rather stay comfortable than be free. Freedom sounds good until you realize what it actually costs. Everyone says they want to be free. Free from the system. Free from control. Free to live life on their own terms. But the second freedom asks for sacrifice. Comfort, security, certainty. Most people run right back to their cage and pretend they chose it. Because here's the raw truth. Most people would rather be comfortable than free. Not because they are weak. Not because they are stupid. But because real freedom is terrifying. It's messy. It requires full responsibility. No one to blame. No excuses. Just you, your choices, and the consequences. And for a lot of people that is way too much to carry. Comfort is addictive. It whispers to you. It tells you to take the easy way. Stay safe. Don't rock the boat. And the world is built to reward that mindset. Obey the rules, follow the script, and we will give you just enough to keep you quiet. A paycheck, a screen, a couch, some likes, a vacation once a year, so you forget how trapped you really are. That is the deal. And people take it, because the alternative means stepping into the unknown, quitting the job you hate, speaking the truth no one wants to hear, walking away from people who do not get you anymore, standing alone sometimes, living without a map. That is what freedom demands. Not just the dream of a better life, but the death of your old one. And let's be honest, that's terrifying. Because the old life, even if it's miserable, is familiar. Predictable. You know how to survive in it. You know how to play the role. And so you stay. You call it being realistic. You call it being responsible. But deep down, you know you're choosing the cage. It's like the story of the elephant chained to a post. When it was young, it tried to break free and couldn't. So, it stopped trying. And even when it grew strong enough to break the chain, it didn't bother. It believed it was still trapped. That's how most people live. The cage is open, but the mind is not. You see this everywhere. People defending the system that exploits them. People attacking anyone who thinks differently. People who mock freedom because they're afraid of what it would demand from them. And the moment someone starts to break out, starts to challenge the norm, it triggers them. Because deep down, they know they could do it too. But they won't. Not because they can't, because it's easier not to. Here's the twist. The system doesn't even need to control you anymore. It just needs you to fear discomfort, to avoid uncertainty, to crave validation. And once it has those levers, it can let you believe you're free while you do exactly what it wants. Buy this. Believe that. Work here. Think this way. And you call it your choice. But it wasn't. It was survival dressed up as freedom. So what does real freedom feel like? At first, it feels like loss. You lose the comfort of fitting in. You lose the structure that told you what to do. You lose the certainty that someone else has it figured out. And for a while, you feel like you're floating in space. No ground beneath you. No one clapping for your choices. No roadmap. Just silence. And in that silence, you meet yourself. Not the version of you trained to fit in. The real one. The one with instincts, fire, vision. That part of you that got buried under fear and routine. That version of you does not want comfort. It wants purpose. It wants truth. And the moment you start living from that place, really living, not just existing, everything changes. But here's the catch. Most people will not come with you. They'll tell you you've changed, that you think you're better, that you're being unrealistic, and some part of you will want to go back, to shrink, to explain yourself. Don't. That's just the old programming trying to pull you back into the cage. Because once you taste freedom, you'll never fully fit back into a system built to tame you. And yeah, it's hard, it's inconvenient, it's lonely sometimes. But it's real, it's alive, and that's worth more than any comfort could ever give you. So if you've been wondering why so many people settle, why they defend their own limits, why they look at freedom and turn away, now you know. It's not that they don't want it. It's that comfort is louder than truth. Comfort feels safer than growth. And for most people, that is enough. But it does not have to be enough for you. Mass formation psychosis, how people become blind followers. You ever watch a whole crowd do something insane, and no one questions it? People lining up for hours to buy something they do not need, chanting slogans they do not understand, canceling someone they never met. And you sit there thinking, how is no one else seeing this? That right there. That is mass formation psychosis. And it is real. It is terrifying. And it explains why people who seem smart, logical, even kind, can turn into blind followers of madness. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Humans are not as independent as we think. We want to believe we make our own decisions, follow reason, think for ourselves. But most people are shaped by the group, by emotion, repetition, and fear. All it takes is the right environment, and logic goes out the window. What takes its place is groupthink, obedience, a strange, hypnotic loyalty to whatever the collective believes. It starts with isolation. When people feel disconnected, lonely, anxious, uncertain, they become vulnerable. They start craving meaning, belonging, safety. And when a narrative comes along that offers all of that in a simple package, it becomes magnetic. It does not even have to be true. It just has to be repeated. Enough times. Loud enough. With enough fear. Once the story takes hold, everything else gets filtered through it. Doubt becomes dangerous. Questions become betrayal. And suddenly, You have a population that is not thinking anymore. They are following, not because they are evil, but because the story gives them identity, purpose, a sense of moral superiority, and that feeling is more powerful than facts. The psychology behind it is brutal. There is something called narrowing of consciousness. When people get emotionally overwhelmed, their minds stop scanning for complexity. They zoom in on one idea, one enemy, one cause. It becomes all they see. Everything outside that frame feels wrong, threatening, even evil. This is how good people end up cheering for censorship, supporting violence, turning on their neighbors. They are not thinking. They are entranced. And here is the scariest part. The more irrational the group gets, the more righteous they feel. The more disconnected from truth they become, the more certain they are that they are on the right side. That's why trying to argue with someone deep in mass formation rarely works. Facts bounce off. Logic feels like an attack. You are not talking to the person anymore. You are talking to the narrative inside them. And that narrative has one job: protect itself. We have seen this throughout history. Entire nations swept up in madness. People chanting for destruction, thinking they were on a holy mission. Families turning against each other. Friends reporting friends. And all of it driven by fear, repetition, and the desperate need to belong to something. Now fast forward to right now. Look around. Endless streams of media. Social platforms training people to think in headlines and hashtags. Algorithms feeding people more of what confirms their beliefs. Punishing anything that breaks the mold. Constant fear. Constant outrage. You really think mass formation is a relic of the past? It is happening now. On your screen. In your community. In the things you are told not to say. The questions you are not allowed to ask. The way people get shamed, silenced, or erased for stepping outside the group. That is not debate. That is not progress. That is mass formation, disguised as morality. And it feels good, which is what makes it so dangerous. It gives people a hit of identity. I am one of the good ones. I am on the right team. I believe the right thing. And in return, they get approval, belonging. A temporary escape from the chaos inside, but it is a trap. Because once you give up your ability to think, to question, to stand alone, you are not free anymore. You are a follower. And the scariest part is, you will think you chose it, but not everyone falls for it. Some people stay awake. Some people feel the pull but resist. And do you know what the cost is? Isolation, mockery, censorship, being called crazy, being misunderstood. Because waking up in a world under mass formation feels like being the only sober person at a party where everyone else is drunk. And they hate you for not joining in. So how do you stay free when the whole crowd is marching off a cliff? You have to reconnect to truth. Not just data, but your inner compass. You have to be okay with standing alone. You have to watch your own mind and notice when you start craving comfort more than truth. And most of all, you have to stop outsourcing your thinking to the group, even when it feels safer to go along. Mass formation only works when people forget who they are, when they hand over their mind for the illusion of safety. But once even a few people break the spell, it weakens, because one person asking real questions can wake up others, and that is what they fear most. Not rebellion, not riots, but thought, real thought. Because once people start thinking for themselves again, the whole illusion collapses. Cognitive dissonance. Why you ignore inconvenient truths. You ever come across a truth so obvious it smacks you in the face? But instead of accepting it, your brain instantly rejects it. Not because it's false. not because it's irrational, but because deep down, accepting it would mean destroying something you've believed your whole life. That right there is cognitive dissonance, and it controls more people than fear, money, or authority ever could. Cognitive dissonance is not just a psychology term for textbooks. It is the invisible wall that keeps people loyal to broken systems. It is the reason someone can look straight at proof that they are being lied to and still say, "Well, that can't be right." It is not because they are dumb. It is because their mind is trying to protect them from the pain of truth. See, the human brain does not crave truth. It craves comfort, consistency, alignment. It wants all the puzzle pieces to fit nicely so you can go through life feeling stable. But the moment a new truth shows up and it threatens your current reality, that is when the war starts inside. The old belief says one thing, the new truth says something else, and your brain starts sweating. And you know what it does next? It chooses the lie that feels safer, every single time, because accepting the truth would mean admitting you were wrong. It would mean admitting you wasted time, trusted the wrong people, based your identity on something false. That kind of ego death is brutal, so instead, people do mental gymnastics to hold onto the illusion. They rationalize, deflect, ignore, anything but face the reality head on. It happens in every area of life. A person sees that their relationship is toxic, but tells themselves it is just a rough patch. Someone realizes their job is draining their soul, but convinces themselves they should be grateful. Or someone hears undeniable evidence that the system they trust is rigged, and they laugh it off like it is a joke. Not because they do not believe it deep down, but because if they let that truth in, everything else would unravel. This is not weakness, it is biology. When your beliefs are challenged, your brain reacts the same way it would to a physical threat. Your fight or flight system kicks in, your stress hormones spike. Your body literally treats the new idea like a danger to your survival. And in that moment, logic is gone. Now it is about defense. This is why people argue with such intensity when their worldview is threatened. It is not just a difference of opinion. It feels like life or death. Their belief system is their shelter, their compass, and when you poke holes in it, they panic. They do not even realize it is happening. It is instinct. Ever wonder why you feel that weird tension in your chest when someone says something that challenges your view of the world? That is dissonance. That discomfort is your subconscious begging you to run back to safety. And you have a choice in that moment. You either face the friction and grow, or you numb it out and stay the same. Most people choose numb, because staying asleep feels easier than waking up to a life you now have to rebuild from scratch. So they scroll, they distract, they bury themselves in noise. They avoid the books, the conversations, the experiences that might stretch them, because deep down, they know that if they allow in even one inconvenient truth, it will start a chain reaction, and everything they thought was solid might start to crack. But here is the secret no one tells you. That crack, that is where the real self starts to break through. When you stop resisting the truth, even when it burns, you start to become something else, something real. You stop clinging to ideas that were handed to you, and you start building beliefs from your own experience. You stop fearing the collapse of the old, and you start trusting yourself to survive the rebuild. Yeah, it hurts at first. It always does. There is a cost to seeing clearly. You lose certainty. You lose the comfort of thinking you have it all figured out. But what you gain is worth more than gold. You gain integrity, self-trust, the ability to look at the world and say, I would rather be uncomfortable and awake than comfortable and blind. And once you learn to sit with dissonance instead of running from it, you become mentally unstoppable because nothing controls you anymore. Not shame, not fear, not public opinion. You hear something new, something challenging, and instead of shutting it down, you say, maybe. Let me look closer. Let me test it. That curiosity is rare. That willingness is power. Most people will never get there. They will live their entire lives inside a bubble of safe beliefs. Beliefs that were never questioned, never examined, never updated. They will fight to the death to defend those beliefs, not because they are true, but because they are comfortable. But you do not have to be one of them. If you feel that tension, that pull, that mental noise when truth knocks on your door, do not ignore it. That discomfort is not your enemy. It is the alarm clock. It is the first step toward waking up, if you are brave enough to face it. Behavioral conditioning hidden in ads and news. You probably think ads are just trying to sell you stuff. That news is just trying to inform you. But what if I told you they are not just influencing what you buy or what you think? They are shaping how you behave, day by day, without you even realizing it. Because behind every headline, every jingle, every carefully timed commercial break, there is something deeper going on. Behavioral conditioning, Pavlov-level manipulation, scaled for the modern world. This is not a theory. It is how modern persuasion works. They are not shouting at you. They are training you. Quietly, repetitively, with rhythm, with symbols, with triggers. They are rewarding obedience and punishing awareness over and over again until your reactions become automatic. Think about it. Ads do not just push products. They link products to feelings. You are not just buying a car. You are buying freedom. You are not just drinking a soda. You are participating in happiness. That image, that music, that perfect smile. It is all engineered to fire dopamine in your brain. It creates an emotional loop, and once that loop forms, you start craving the product without even knowing why. And it goes further. You are not just being sold things. You are being taught what to value. Fast, easy, convenient, happy, pretty, shiny, new. Over and over again, these messages are wired into your subconscious. So when something shows up in your real life that does not match that programming, when something is slow or hard or raw, you avoid it. Not because it is wrong, but because it feels wrong. Your behavior has been shaped to chase instant gratification and reject anything real. Now look at the news. You think it is about keeping you informed. No, it is about keeping you conditioned. They are not just telling you what happened. They are telling you what to feel, who to blame, and when to panic. Pay attention to how it is structured. Crisis, rage, repeat. You are trained to expect fear, to scan for threat, to seek permission before forming an opinion. That is not information. That is stimulus and response. And it works because your brain is wired for patterns. The more a message repeats, the more your mind accepts it as true. The more emotion it triggers, the deeper it sinks. Repetition plus emotion equals belief. That is the formula. That is how they install thoughts that feel like your own, but are not. You ever wonder why you reach for your phone the second you feel uncomfortable? That was trained. Why silence feels awkward now? Trained. Why boredom feels unbearable? Trained. Your attention span, your instincts, your emotional habits, shaped by years of subtle inputs designed to create predictable reactions. And this is not just passive. It is reinforced with reward and punishment. You post something that fits the script. You get likes, validation, dopamine. You say something off, narrative. You get shamed, shadow banned, silenced. Over time, your behavior adjusts. You learn to conform, to self-censor. Not because someone forced you to, but because the system made it feel easier. And here is where it gets dark. The most effective conditioning is invisible. You never question it because it feels natural. The brand becomes your identity. The headline becomes your reality. The screen becomes your escape. And you tell yourself, I chose this. But did you? Or did you just respond to the cues they gave you? This is not a glitch in the system. This is the system. The point was never to inform you. The point was to mold you into a consumer, a voter, a loyalist, a believer, a predictable, programmable participant in a machine that feeds on your habits. Even the idea of rebellion has been branded. You do not question authority anymore. You switch sides. Buy the other product. Wear the other message. And the whole time, you still play the same game. Still obey the same psychological rules. Still dance when they ring the bell. And here is the kicker. You are not the customer. You are the product. Your data, your attention, your reaction time, your triggers, your decisions. That is what is being sold behind the scenes. Behavioral profiles that allow companies, media, and governments to predict what you will do and how to make you do it. So, what do you do about it? First, you slow down, you stop reacting. You notice what your body is doing when you scroll, when you watch, when you consume. That impulse, that craving, that irritation, that is the program. And the moment you see it, you break its grip. Then you start asking real questions. Why do I want this? Why do I believe this? Why did I react that way? Whose voice is this in my head? You start tracing your thoughts back to the source. And when you find that the source is not you, you let it go. Because your behavior is not just something you do. It is who you become. And the more you hand it over to invisible forces, the more your life becomes a series of reactions instead of choices. But the moment you take it back, even a little, you stop being a puppet. You stop being programmable. And that changes everything. Why politicians serve corporations, not people? You ever wonder why every election feels like a choice, but nothing ever really changes? Different faces, same promises, same results. Roads still broken, healthcare still a mess, cost of living still rising. But corporate profits, sky high, political donors, smiling. And you are just trying to survive. That is not by accident. That is the design. Because politicians do not serve the people. They serve corporations. And they have for a long time. Let's get real. Running for office in today's system is not about leadership. It is about funding. You want to win. You need money. Not just a little, millions. You need ads. You need media coverage. You need campaign machines. And guess who writes the biggest checks? It is not the single mom working 2 jobs. It is not the guy who just got laid off. It is corporations, mega donors, lobby groups, the ones with something to gain. And no one gives millions of dollars out of kindness. They want something back. Favors, laws, loopholes, influence. And politicians know the game. You dance for the money or you lose. So they play along. They talk about the people on stage, but behind closed doors, they are on the phone with CEOs, strategists, lobbyists, making deals, cutting corners, selling pieces of the public good to the highest bidder. You think a politician wakes up and decides to back a tax loophole that saves oil companies billions just for fun? No, it is paid for. That vote was purchased before you even knew it was on the table. And when it passes, And you wonder why your community gets less while the elite get more. That is why. There is this illusion that politics is public service, that leaders are supposed to represent the will of the people. But the system has flipped. Now the people are a talking point, a campaign slogan, a prop. The real service is to capital, to power, to the corporations that can make or break a candidate's future with a single check, and the media. They are not holding these people accountable. They are part of the same machinery, owned by the same handful of conglomerates, funded by the same advertisers. You do not hear real questions because no one on the air is allowed to ask them. You do not get the truth because the truth threatens the money flow. What you get is theater, manufactured outrage, surface-level debate, all while the real decisions, the ones that affect your bank account, your future, your rights, happen out of sight. And here is what most people miss. Corporations do not need to win elections. They just need access. So they fund both sides. Democrat, Republican. It does not matter, as long as the winner answers their calls, as long as regulations get watered down, as long as the tax breaks roll in, as long as the subsidies keep flowing. That is the game. And it works because people are distracted, trained to argue about cultural noise, trained to fight each other. Meanwhile, both parties quietly agree on the stuff that keeps the corporate world happy. Endless war contracts, bailouts, surveillance expansion, deregulation, privatization, all wrapped in fancy language to keep you asleep. And the kicker: when things go wrong, they blame you. You are not working hard enough. You are not managing your finances. You are the reason the system is broken. Meanwhile, billion-dollar corporations dodge taxes, lay off workers, and buy politicians who will defend them with a straight face. It is not broken. It is bought. And until you see that clearly, you will keep hoping for change that never comes. You will keep cheering for saviors who never deliver. Because they were never sent to save you. They were sent to manage you, to keep you believing, to keep you voting, to keep you compliant. Now, are there exceptions? Sure, but they are rare, and the system is designed to isolate and silence them, because real change would threaten too many powerful pockets. So even the ones who show up with integrity get pressured, pushed out, or absorbed into the machine. So what does that mean for you? It means you cannot wait for the system to fix itself. It means you cannot keep treating elections like moral redemption. It means you need to understand where power actually lies. Follow the money, not the slogans. It means you start building your own awareness, your own strength, your own network of truth. Stop looking up and start looking around, at your community, your skills, your values, because the more you depend on a system that sees you as a number, the more powerless you become. And when enough people stop buying the illusion, stop mistaking politics for progress, that is when things start to crack, because the only thing keeping this scam running is belief. The belief that they work for you, that they care about you, that they will come through this time. They will not. But the second you stop waiting for them and start thinking for yourself, that is when you become ungovernable in the best possible way. The real reason truth-tellers are labeled dangerous. You ever notice how the people who speak the raw truth are almost always the ones who get silenced first? Not the liars, not the manipulators, not the polished influencers with safe, empty messages. It is the ones who cut deep, the ones who say what everyone else is too scared to even whisper. And somehow, those are the people the system calls dangerous. But why? What is so threatening about truth? because truth exposes power. Truth cuts through illusion. Truth makes people see what they were never supposed to notice. And that kind of clarity, that kind of vision, it does not just wake one person up, it causes a ripple, it spreads. It infects minds. And the people in charge, they cannot afford that. See, power thrives in fog, in distraction, in noise. So when someone walks in and clears the air with truth, it threatens the whole machine, not just with facts, but with energy. Truth has a frequency. When someone speaks it, you feel it in your bones. It stirs something primal, something that cannot be explained away or laughed off. That is why they do not just ignore truth-tellers. They attack them. They smear them. They label them as extreme, unstable, dangerous. They try to isolate them. Because if people actually listened, if people actually paid attention, it would flip the whole script. Suddenly the liars would look like fools. The cowards would look complicit, and the public would start asking questions that cannot be answered with spin. Look at history. Anyone who ever told an uncomfortable truth got branded as a threat. They were mocked, censored, sometimes worse, not because they were wrong, but because they were too right, too loud, too undeniable. Because once you hear a truth that resonates, really hits your soul, you cannot unhear it. You cannot go back. That is dangerous to systems built on control, systems that rely on your obedience, not your awareness. And the ones in power, they know that once enough people wake up, the fear-based illusion starts to crack. So the strategy is simple. Discredit the source before the message spreads. Paint them as crazy. Call them a conspiracy theorist. Make the public afraid of being associated with them. Because that fear is powerful. Most people would rather stay silent than be labeled. Most people would rather fit in than risk being targeted. But here is the twist. They are not afraid of the truth teller. They are afraid of you listening. They know that truth, once it takes root, is hard to kill. That is why they do not just try to censor. They try to overwhelm. They flood the space with distractions, with noise, with fake alternatives. So even if you are searching, you get lost in the static. That is not a mistake. That is the tactic. Confuse the mind, exhaust the spirit, and make truth feel like just another opinion. And when that does not work, they use shame. Oh, you believe that? You must be one of them. A radical, a lunatic, a threat. They make you question your own sanity just for seeing clearly. That is not accidental either. That is psychological warfare. It is social control dressed up as polite conversation. But the irony. The more they label someone dangerous, the more you should pay attention. Because the truth does not need to be defended with force. It stands on its own. The only time a message needs to be buried is when it threatens the wrong kind of people. Truth-tellers are not dangerous because they promote violence. They are dangerous because they promote independence. They do not tell you what to think. They teach you how to think. And that scares the hell out of a system built on your dependence. You are supposed to trust the experts. Trust the headlines. Trust the approved narrative. But when someone comes along and says, think for yourself, ask better questions, follow the evidence wherever it leads, you start to realize how much of your reality was handed to you, not chosen by you. And once that realization hits, the spell breaks. That is what they are really afraid of. Not chaos, not misinformation, but clarity, ownership, inner strength. Because the moment you stop outsourcing your truth, you become ungovernable, not in a reckless way, but in a calm, unshakable way. You are no longer easy to manipulate, easy to divide, easy to herd. Truth-tellers hold up a mirror, And what people see in that mirror, whether it is hypocrisy, fear, or denial, is often too much to handle. So instead of facing it, they shatter the mirror. They shoot the messenger. And the system claps, because now the problem is solved. But truth does not die with censorship. It waits. It sits in the silence. It echoes. And it always finds another voice, another moment, another platform. Because once it is out there, it cannot be undone. It just waits for someone brave enough to pick it up and speak it again. Maybe that someone is you. Why knowing the truth is only step one. People think waking up means everything changes. Like the moment you find the truth, you are free. But that is the lie. Knowing the truth is not the finish line. It is the starting gun. And what comes next? That is where most people tap out. Because truth, it is heavy. It does not wrap itself in comfort. It does not come with a user manual. It hits you hard. It shakes your identity, destroys your illusions, forces you to see how much of your life was built on someone else's blueprint. And when that illusion cracks, your entire reality starts to tilt. But here is the real kicker. Knowing does not change anything unless you act on it. And that is the part no one talks about. That gut punch moment when you realize, I see it now, but nothing around me has changed. The job is the same. The rules are the same. The system is still rolling. And now you are standing in it fully aware, but just as trapped as before. That is where the pain kicks in. See, when you were asleep, you had excuses. You could blame the world, blame the media, blame the system. But once you know, those excuses vanish. You see the manipulation and still scroll. You hear the lies and still nod along. You recognize the trap and still walk into it. That internal war. That is the cost of awareness. It is one thing to know you are in a cage. It is another thing to figure out how to escape it. And the cage is not just physical. It is psychological, emotional, financial. It is in the way you were raised, the way you were trained to think, the way you react without even knowing why. You are not just unplugging from one illusion. You are unlearning an entire framework. That takes more than knowledge. It takes work, real work. The kind that does not come with applause or rewards or followers. The kind that forces you to sit with your own weakness, your own conditioning, your own role in keeping yourself small. And that is where people back away. Because truth does not just show you what is wrong out there. It shows you what is unfinished in you. And that is terrifying, because when you cannot unsee the game, you also cannot pretend to be innocent. You start realizing how you played along, how you benefited from the system you now claim to reject. And change, real change, that requires sacrifice. Not the kind that looks cool on the internet, the kind that costs you comfort, relationships, security, sometimes even your sanity. People say they want freedom, but most of them want comfortable awareness. A little truth, just enough to feel smart, just enough to complain, but not enough to transform, because transformation hurts. It burns through your lies. It makes you confront the parts of yourself you would rather bury. And most people are not ready for that level of honesty. They think waking up means waking others up, posting more, debating more, preaching more. But the truth is, most of that is noise, ego, performance. Because if you were really doing the work, you would be too busy rebuilding your life to argue online. You would be too deep in your own reconstruction to care about convincing anyone else. Knowing is step one. Becoming is step two. Becoming someone who lives the truth, breathes it, carries it in how you think, how you move, how you treat people. That part. It is slow, quiet, messy. There is no applause for choosing integrity over attention, no trophy for rebuilding your value system from the ground up. Just long nights, internal battles, and moments where you question everything all over again. But that is where the real freedom is, not in knowing what is fake, but in committing to what is real, and real things, they are often invisible. Discipline, decency, self-mastery, emotional intelligence, boundaries, silence. Those are the things no one taught you to value, because those are the things that make you hard to control. The system does not fear people who know the truth. It fears people who live it, who embody it, who walk away from the fake life and never look back, because those people cannot be bought. They cannot be distracted. They cannot be baited into outrage. They do not need approval, and that makes them dangerous in the best way. So no, knowing the truth is not enough. That is the easy part. The information is out there. The lies are obvious. The corruption is public. Anyone with eyes can see it. But acting on that knowledge, living differently, that is rare. So ask yourself this: what have you changed since you woke up? Not what do you believe? Not what do you say? What have you actually done differently? What habits have you broken? What illusions have you stopped feeding? What comforts have you let go of? Because until the truth reaches your hands, your feet, your schedule, your spending, your relationships, it is just information. Insight without action is just another drug, another distraction, another way to feel enlightened while staying exactly the same. Truth is not a destination. It is a mirror, and the longer you stare into it, the more you are forced to decide, will I build a life that aligns with what I see, or will I keep pretending that knowing is enough? You already know the answer. The question is, are you brave enough to live it? The hidden influence of think tanks and lobbyists. You probably think laws are made by elected officials. That change starts with the people, reaches Congress, gets debated, voted on, and boom, democracy in action. But that is the surface. That is the show. What really shapes your world, your taxes, your freedoms, your future? It happens in rooms you will never enter, by people you have never heard of. They are not politicians. They are not activists. They are not even on the ballot. They are think tanks and lobbyists, and they write the playbook for the system you think is yours. Here is how it actually works. A think tank creates a solution to a problem you did not know existed. It sounds official, even helpful. They use charts, reports, white papers, fancy titles like strategic framework or policy blueprint. Then lobbyists take that blueprint and march it straight into the offices of lawmakers, already packaged and ready to pass. The politician barely has to lift a finger. They get a script, they get the data, they get the campaign donation, and in return, they push the bill. Just like that, your laws are written by people who were never elected, backed by money you cannot trace, and passed by leaders who barely read what they just voted for. Now here is the kicker. The same think tanks who write these policies are funded by corporations, foreign interests, and private billionaires. They do not serve the public. They serve their patrons, want tax breaks for the rich. There is a think tank for that. Want endless wars. There is a think tank for that too. Want to deregulate industries so corporations can do whatever they want. You better believe there are lobbyists with legislation already in their briefcases. And it is all legal. That is what makes it so dangerous. You cannot vote these people out. You cannot argue with them at town halls. You do not even know their names. But they sit in the background, decade after decade, shaping the direction of the country while you are busy picking red or blue. It is like arguing over the color of the curtain while the entire building is being redesigned behind your back. And the media, they do not touch this. Why? Because many of the experts they invite to speak on air, you guessed it, come from think tanks. Their job is not to inform you. Their job is to push a narrative, to make it look like policy comes from intelligence and reason, not money and manipulation. You hear a smooth, talking analyst say, "We need to intervene overseas." What you are not told is that they are paid by defense contractors. You read an op-ed calling for deregulation. What you are not told is that the author's think tank is backed by fossil fuel giants. The bias is hidden behind credentials, behind fake neutrality. But make no mistake, it is bought and paid for. And when you trace the money, the same names show up over and over. Wealthy families, international banks, industry titans. People who do not just want to make a profit, they want to reshape society to ensure they never lose control. It is not a conspiracy. It is a business model. Think tanks pump out ideas that benefit their donors. Lobbyists sell those ideas to politicians. Politicians pass them to look competent and connected. And the public, left in the dark. You are not part of the conversation. You are the aftermath. And here is what makes this so difficult to fight. It feels invisible. Because it is not loud. It is not chaotic. It is not happening in front of cameras. It is quiet influence. Institutional manipulation. They do not need to rig votes if they already control the options. They do not need to censor you if they already shaped what you think is possible. That is how deep it goes. Most people will never question it, because it is dressed up in professionalism, in suits, in language that sounds important. But underneath, it is just concentrated power pretending to be public service. And they count on you being too distracted, too tired, too trusting to notice. But once you do notice, once you realize that the biggest decisions about your life are made in private meetings between lobbyists and lawmakers, the illusion starts to break. You stop asking the wrong questions. You stop looking for answers on the surface. You start following the money, the influence, the architecture of power itself. And when you do that, everything looks different. You realize politics is not broken, it is working exactly as designed. Not for you, but for them. The next time you see a bill pass and wonder who really benefits, look at who funded the think tank behind it. Look at which industries sent lobbyists to push it. Look at which politician got a new donor after voting yes. Because when you pull on that thread, you will find the real puppet masters. And they do not care who you vote for, as long as you never look behind the curtain. Who really benefits from perpetual wars? When was the last time a war actually ended? Seriously, think about it. Not just the news cycle calming down. Not just troops coming home for a photo op. I mean really ended. Resolved. Over. You cannot name one, can you? Because that is the point. Wars are not designed to end anymore. They are designed to continue. To stretch on endlessly. To shift locations. To evolve into new threats. To become a background hum so constant, you forget it was never supposed to be normal. And the people who suffer, it is never the ones pushing the buttons. It is the families, the soldiers, the civilians caught in the middle. It is your tax dollars funding missiles instead of medicine, surveillance instead of schools. But the people who benefit, they never see the battlefield. They are too busy collecting checks. Let me make this clear. Perpetual war is not a failure of the system. It is the business model. Every time a new conflict breaks out, defense stocks surge. Contractors get new deals. Governments sign off on billion-dollar budgets in the name of security. But the real war is for profit, for influence, for control of resources, economies, and populations. And once you understand that, everything starts to make sense. Why are we always told the enemy is out there, hiding, growing, preparing to strike? Why does the narrative always return to fear, threat, danger? Because fear keeps the engine running. Fear justifies the funding. Fear makes you accept what you would normally reject. You want to know who really benefits. Follow the money. There are entire industries that depend on global instability. Think tanks, arms manufacturers, surveillance tech, private military companies. These groups do not want peace. Peace does not pay. Peace does not make headlines. Peace does not justify a trillion-dollar defense budget. And here is where it gets darker. They do not even need real wars anymore. The illusion is enough. As long as the public believes there is a threat, the machine keeps moving. A drone strike here, a rebel group there, a classified briefing with just enough ambiguity to keep the fear alive. And while you are glued to headlines about distant chaos, nobody is talking about where the money goes. About the blank checks passed without question. About how war becomes an excuse to erode your freedoms at home in the name of national security. And the craziest part, most people cheer for it, because they have been conditioned to believe war equals safety. That more bombs somehow equals more peace. That patriotism means never asking who is actually profiting from the blood. You know how much one single fighter jet costs? Over $100 million. Now multiply that across hundreds. Add missiles. Add tanks. Add surveillance satellites. Add the private contractors billing triple what a soldier makes in a year. All funded by you, by your future, by your silence. And meanwhile, veterans come home broken, ignored, discarded. Entire nations are left in rubble. Children grow up knowing nothing but drones overhead and gunfire at night. But hey, defense profits are up this quarter, so Wall Street smiles. That is what perpetual war really is. Organized destruction for sustained profit. And the worst part, it is not hidden. It is all out in the open. Defense spending is public record. Contractor deals are public record. Lobbying from weapons manufacturers is public record. The only reason it keeps working is because people choose not to look. Because looking hurts. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You start realizing that every time you are told there is no money for healthcare, for education, for clean water, it is a lie. The money is there. It is just being funneled into weapons that will never bring peace. War is no longer about victory. It is about sustainability. Not for you, for them. It is about keeping the world in just enough chaos to justify control, surveillance, censorship. Because when people feel afraid, they stop asking questions. They hand over their freedoms. They look the other way, and those in power. They learned long ago that an enemy with no face, no timeline, no end. That is the perfect justification for endless power. You think the war is over there, but the real war is here. On your attention, your beliefs, your willingness to question. The system does not need your approval. It just needs your distraction. Because the second people stop blindly cheering for war and start asking who is cashing the checks, the whole illusion starts to collapse. And that is what they are really afraid of. Not peace, but awareness. So ask yourself, who benefits from endless conflict? And more importantly, what would happen if people stopped playing along? Why privacy is already dead, and no one noticed. You did not lose your privacy. You gave it away. Not in one moment, not all at once, bit by bit, app by app, click by click. You traded it for convenience, for speed, for likes, for directions, for weather updates, for dopamine hits, and by the time you realized what you traded, there was nothing left to take back. Privacy is not dying. It is already gone. And the wild part, most people do not even care. They still think they have some kind of control, as if turning off location settings or using incognito mode means something. It doesn't. Your data is not just collected when you give permission. It is collected by default. In the background, through loopholes, through terms you never read and tech you cannot see. You are being tracked by your phone, your watch, your car, your smart TV, your search history, your voice commands, even the people around you who gave apps permission to access their contacts. You never opted in. You just live in a world where opting out is no longer an option. And the thing is, that was always the plan. Because privacy gets in the way of control. It gets in the way of targeted ads. It gets in the way of predictive algorithms. It gets in the way of building psychological profiles. So they made it feel normal to give it up, made it feel cool, made it feel necessary. Then they stopped asking. Now you are the product. Everything you do is tracked, analyzed, sold, and weaponized against you. Your clicks tell a story. Your pauses tell a story. Your misspellings. Your scrolling patterns. Your favorite brands. Your worst fears. Your insecurities. Your shopping cart that you abandoned at 2 in the morning. It all feeds the machine. And that machine knows you better than you know yourself. It knows when you are tired, when you are lonely, when you are about to break up, when you are close to a mental spiral. It knows what to show you to keep you numb, or angry, or scared, because when you are in those states, you are more likely to spend, more likely to click, more likely to believe. Privacy is not just about hiding. It is about sovereignty. It is about control over your own story, your own identity, your own patterns, and that has been stripped from you under the illusion of personalization. You thought it was about making your life easier, but what it really did was make you predictable, and predictable people are easy to manipulate. Think about this. Every message you send, every photo you upload, every purchase, every playlist, every late night search, every voice command, it all builds a replica of you in the digital space, an invisible version of you that advertisers, corporations, governments, and algorithms interact with more than the real you. And you have no control over that version. You do not own it. You cannot delete it. You cannot see it. But decisions are being made about you based on it. What job opportunities you get shown. What interest rates you are offered. What news you see. What content is pushed to the top of your feed. And you do not even realize it is happening. That is the genius of it. They did not take your privacy with force. They took it with comfort. They made you addicted to the technology that surveils you. They made you dependent on the systems that extract you. And now, even if you wanted out, where would you go? Everything is connected. Everything is online. Try living without a phone, without an email, without GPS, without search engines, without streaming, without banking apps. You can't. And they know it. This is not science fiction. This is your life right now. Every camera, every mic, every device, all quietly listening, not to spy in the way movies portray it, but to harvest data, your emotions, your language, your environment, so the system can learn how to influence you more effectively tomorrow. And still, people shrug it off, because it is invisible, because it feels harmless, because it is normal now. But that is how control works best. when it hides behind convenience, when it feels like your idea, when it becomes so embedded in your lifestyle that it stops feeling like surveillance at all. You do not feel watched anymore because you have adapted to being watched. You changed your behavior. You filtered your thoughts. You edited your truth, not because anyone told you to, but because you knew, deep down, it was being recorded. And that is the most dangerous part. When surveillance becomes so constant that censorship becomes internal, when you no longer need to be silenced, because you already silence yourself. That is the moment privacy is not just dead, it is erased from your imagination. So no, privacy is not something we are fighting to protect. It is something we already lost. The question now is not how to get it back. It is how to wake people up to the fact that it is gone. Because until they see the cage, they will never look for the key. Why the system punishes those who speak up. You ever wonder why the people who speak the real truth get crushed? Not the polite truth. Not the watered down version that keeps everyone comfortable. I'm talking about the kind of truth that rattles power, that exposes lies, that tears masks off the system and says to everyone watching, this is not real. And what happens to those people? They get labeled dangerous, ridiculed, silenced, blocked, fired, sued. Sometimes even worse, they get erased. And you wonder, why? Why does speaking the truth turn so many people against you? Why does it feel like the world attacks you for being honest? Because power does not fear lies. Lies are easy to manage. You just spin another one. But truth is radioactive. It burns through the fog. It exposes the rot. It makes people see things they can't unsee. And that kind of clarity, that kind of vision, it is a threat to any system built on illusions. When you speak up, when you say something that pierces the collective illusion, the system reacts like an immune response. You become the virus they need to eliminate. You get flagged, targeted, marginalized, not because your message is wrong, but because you are disruptive. But here's where it gets harder. The system is not just government or big business or mainstream media. It is culture. It is norms. It is the people around you, friends, colleagues, even family. They are conditioned so deeply to defend the illusion that anyone who punches a hole in it becomes the enemy. You speak truth, and suddenly you are the unstable one, the aggressive one, the problem. Even if your words are measured, logical, factual, that reaction is instinct. Because if you are right, if the truth you speak is legitimate, then everything they built their comfort around starts to crack. And most of them are not ready for that to happen. That is why whistleblowers lose jobs, why journalists get silenced, why people are canceled for everyone's own good. That is why people stop asking difficult questions, because their truth cost them too much. They saw what happened to others, so they stay quiet, they blend in, they pretend everything is fine. But those who do speak up, they choose something deeper. They choose their integrity over their comfort, their message over their popularity, and they know what they're up against. They know the system will lean on your fears. It will use shame, loneliness, professional backlash, social isolation. That is why it is so risky. And yet some still do it. Because at some point, silence becomes worse than consequence. Silence becomes a betrayal of yourself, of your purpose, of the people who deserve to hear the truth. Here's something else that most people don't realize. The system punishes not just because it fears you, but because it fears what you might cause others to do. See, fear only works when the quietness spreads, when compliance spreads, when people stay in line. But when one voice stands, others listen, others wake, others question. And that ripple becomes a movement. The system can't survive when enough voices speak. So it tries to kill hope early. It gossips. It spins. It isolates. It tears into character. It makes you doubt your own sanity. All to show everyone else what happens if you don't fall in line. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. That punishment only has power when people believe it is universal. That it will happen to them too. As long as that fear exists, people will stay quiet. So why risk it? Because the alternative is living a lie. And some truths are too heavy to carry without saying them. You're not reckless for speaking truth. You're courageous. You're not a troublemaker. You're a clarifier. And the system fears you. Not because your message is wrong, but because it is right. And if they punish you, it is not because they won. It is because they are desperate. They know something is breaking, and you are part of the breakthrough. You might lose a friend, a job, respect, but you might also spark clarity, courage, a new idea that refuses to be silenced. That is why speaking truth is so powerful. Because you do not just communicate facts, you speak possibility. You show it is possible to be clear, to be honest, to be real, and the ripple that follows, that is what scares them most. So yes, the system punishes those who speak up, but not because they are wrong, because they are right. And once the structure responds with force, the foundation trembles, because power built on silence cannot survive sound. So if you have ever considered speaking your truth, know this. What you face is fierce. But more powerful by far is what you can awaken in others. That is the real threat. And that is the real reason they try to bury truth before people even hear it. But the moment someone finds the courage to speak, that is the moment the spell begins to break. How data is the new currency, and you're giving it away. You think money runs the world. No, data does. Data is the currency now. Not paper, not coins, not even digital dollars. The real power is in information. And you are giving it away. Every second. Every scroll. Every click. And the wildest part, you are not just giving it away. You are paying them with it. Paying them to manipulate you. You are the product, not the customer. If something is free, you better believe you are the one being sold. Every time you use a free app, check the weather, look up directions, track a workout, sign into a store with your email. You are handing over tiny pieces of yourself. They do not need your credit card anymore. They need your behavior, your preferences, your patterns. That is where the money is. Because once they know what makes you tick, they know how to sell to you, how to keep you distracted, how to keep you addicted, how to pull you toward whatever serves them and away from whatever wakes you up. This is not a conspiracy. This is the business model. Look around. Companies are not just tech companies anymore. They are data companies. Everything from your smart fridge to your car to your kids' toys is harvesting something. Location, voice, movement, emotion, timing. All of it is more valuable than dollars. Why? Because data is leverage. Data is prediction. Data is control. If I know your fears, I know how to influence your decisions. If I know when you are most impulsive, I know when to hit you with ads. If I know what you think you want before you want it, I can steer your choices without you ever realizing it. That is not capitalism. That is behavioral control disguised as convenience. And here is the terrifying part. Most people are doing it voluntarily. They think data is just boring analytics, numbers on a screen. But it is not. It is your life, digitized and sold to the highest bidder. It is your thoughts, your habits, your inner world, scraped and repackaged as insights. The most powerful companies on the planet do not produce products. They collect behavior. They analyze people. They run simulations on how to shape you without your permission. You ever wonder why your feed feels so tailored? Why your ads seem psychic? Why content appears just when you need distraction? It is not magic. It is your data talking back to you. You are in a feedback loop. The system watches what you do and then feeds you more of it. More outrage, more fear, more fantasy, more desire. Because that is what keeps you hooked. And the more you engage, the more precise it becomes. But here is what no one tells you. This isn't just about advertising. This is about identity engineering. They do not just want your money. They want your mind. They want to shape who you are through what you consume, not by force, not by threat, but by repetition, by subtle nudges, by algorithmic nudges so small you think they are your idea. They study your language, your facial expressions, your typing speed. They build a profile that is not just demographic, it is psychological, emotional, predictive, and you handed it over. For likes, for free storage, for a game, for convenience. That is the trade no one read the fine print on. Data is not just currency, it is power, and the people who own your data own a version of you that you do not even fully understand. Let that sink in. They can test what makes you angry, what makes you stop scrolling, what gets you to click, and they use those experiments in real time, not to serve you, but to harvest more of you. This is not about privacy anymore. This is about agency, about autonomy, about free will. Because once your behavior is predictable, it is programmable. And if you do not believe that, ask yourself this. When was the last time you changed your mind without an algorithm nudging you first? When was the last time you searched for something that was not already trending? You think you are making your own choices, but the framework around those choices is already shaped by your data trail. They know what you are likely to choose before you do. So yeah, data is the new currency, and you are not getting paid. You are being mined, extracted, modeled, monetized, and then fed back into the loop. And the longer you ignore it, the deeper it goes. Because the more they know about you, the less you know about how much they are influencing you. This is not a rant. This is a reality check. You are not just scrolling. You are building a digital profile, one that shapes what you see, how you think, how you feel, and slowly, how you live. The system does not need to control you directly. It just needs to shape your inputs. That is the game. And you are already playing. The question is, are you even aware of the cost? Why people fear truth more than lies? If truth really sets you free, then why does it scare the hell out of people? Think about it. People say they want truth. They ask for it. They pretend to chase it. But when it actually shows up, raw and unfiltered, they run from it. They get defensive. They get angry. They shut down. Not because the truth is evil, but because it threatens everything they built their life around. See, a lie can be cozy. A lie lets you sleep at night. It protects your ego. It tells you you're right, that you're good, that your life makes sense. A lie doesn't demand change. Truth does. And that is where the fear comes in. Truth doesn't just inform you, it confronts you. It puts a mirror in your face and says this is what's real, not what you wish was real. It forces you to look at what you've avoided, the way you've been manipulated, the beliefs you never questioned, the systems you trusted, the roles you played, all of it. And that kind of confrontation, Most people are not ready for it, because truth doesn't just expose the world, it exposes you. You start realizing how many decisions you made based on lies, how many relationships were fake, how much of your identity was built to fit in, not to be free. That is not an easy pill to swallow. So what do people do? They reject the truth and cling to the lie, even if the lie is crumbling, even if it hurts them, because the lie is familiar. The lie is safe. The lie lets them keep pretending. That is why people defend their illusions more aggressively than they defend reality. Because if they lose the illusion, they have to face the fact that they were wrong, that they were fooled, that they were part of something broken. And for most people, ego can't take that. Psychologically, it is called cognitive dissonance. That moment where two truths clash, one you believe, one that contradicts it, and your brain starts to panic. So it chooses comfort. It chooses the version of reality that causes the least emotional damage. Even if that means ignoring facts, even if that means attacking the person who showed you the truth in the first place. You see it in politics, in religion, in health, in history, in your personal life. People would rather shoot the messenger than face what the message implies. They'll say you're negative, toxic, dangerous, paranoid, not because they know you're wrong, but because deep down, part of them knows you're right. And knowing you're right means they might have to change, might have to admit they were wrong, might have to let go of identities and beliefs they've carried for years. And that is terrifying. Truth is not just a new idea, it is a demolition. It breaks things. It breaks illusions, certainties. But it doesn't do it to destroy. It does it to rebuild. That's the difference. Truth burns through the fog so you can finally see. But most people are scared of what that clarity might show them. So they hide in groupthink. They hide in slogans, in trends, in what the crowd believes. Because if enough people agree on the same lie, it starts to feel like truth. But feeling true and being true are not the same. And deep down, some part of you knows when something isn't real. You feel it in your gut, in your silence, in the questions you're too afraid to ask. You feel the tension between what you were told and what you sense. That's where the fear starts. In that gap, the bigger the gap, the more threatening the truth becomes. So why go there? Why risk it? Because truth, while painful, is the only thing that can actually liberate you. It may break your world apart, but it gives you a shot at rebuilding it with your eyes open, with intention, with alignment, with actual self-respect. Lies will keep you asleep in a life that was never yours. Truth might wake you up into a storm, but at least it's your storm. And here's what no one tells you. The more you face truth, the less scary it becomes. At first it shocks you, then it humbles you, then it sharpens you, and eventually, it empowers you. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop clinging to fake certainty. You become teachable. You become aware. You become dangerous in the best way, because you cannot be manipulated by the same lies anymore. That is why systems fear truth. That is why people reject it. Because once it enters your mind, the old game doesn't work on you the same way. And once enough people stop fearing truth, they start telling it, living it. And suddenly the lies lose their power. Truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be heard. And the first step to hearing it is daring to admit that maybe, just maybe, what you believed was never real. And that fear, that hesitation, that resistance, it is not weakness. It is the door. How language is used to shape your reality. You think language is just a way to describe the world. No, it is how your world is built. Words are not neutral. They shape how you think, how you feel, how you see everything around you. Language is not just communication, it is programming. And if you do not realize that, someone else is already shaping your reality for you. Here is what they do not want you to notice. If they can control the words, they do not need to control you directly, because your perception becomes the prison. Take something simple. A protest becomes a riot. A victim becomes a threat. A war becomes a peacekeeping mission. That is not just spin. That is linguistic manipulation. That is power working through vocabulary. The minute you change the word, you change the emotional charge. You change the way people frame the situation. And that framing determines what they believe, what they fear, and what they accept as normal. You are not reacting to reality. You are reacting to the language used to describe it. It starts young. Before you even know what you believe, you are taught words that come with values baked in, good and bad, right and wrong, success and failure. You are given labels before you understand who you are: smart, lazy, gifted, difficult. And those labels do not just describe you. They become your identity. Your entire sense of self is filtered through a language you did not choose. And when someone wants to manipulate a population, they do not need weapons. They need control of the narrative. And narratives are built with words. Think about it. Why do you think entire industries obsess over naming things? Why do politicians rehearse every soundbite? Why does every corporation have a department just for messaging? Because they understand something most people don't. That whoever frames the language frames the debate. And whoever frames the debate wins. If you call surveillance safety, people accept it. If you call censorship protection, people support it. If you call submission unity, people feel proud for obeying. The language wraps the poison in sugar, and most people swallow it whole. You start to notice it once you step back. How certain words are designed to shut down thought. Words like misinformation, extremist, conspiracy. These words do not invite discussion. They end it. They are trigger words, emotional landmines. And when you hear them, your brain reacts before your logic does. That is not an accident. That is design. Because once you have emotional language wrapped around a belief, it becomes much harder to question it. You do not want to be the one labeled wrong. So you keep quiet. You go along. You internalize the frame. And here is the thing. It does not stop at politics. It is in your personal life, too. You call it self-improvement, but maybe it is self-rejection. You call it being realistic, but maybe it is fear wearing a suit. You call it love, but maybe it is control. The wrong words lead you to the wrong stories. And the wrong stories keep you trapped in the wrong life. You see, the words you use to describe something literally change the way your brain stores it. Language shapes memory. It shapes emotional response. It even shapes perception. There is a reason certain cultures have multiple words for what others only have one. Because when you have more words, you have more awareness. You can see finer distinctions. You can feel more precisely. You can think more clearly. But when your vocabulary is limited, your thinking is limited. Your feelings get blurred. Your understanding gets shallow, and shallow minds are easy to control. So when the system wants to dumb people down, it doesn't just attack education. It degrades language. It replaces clarity with slogans. It turns thinking into reacting. It replaces dialogue with sound bites. And over time, people lose the ability to articulate what they even feel. because they were never given the words to name it. And if you cannot name something, you cannot fight it. That is how power works in the modern world. Not always through violence, not always through force, but through definitions, through repetition, through narrative saturation. Say a lie often enough in the right words, and it becomes someone's truth. But here is what makes this even more dangerous. The person who controls your language does not need to tell you what to think. They just need to tell you how to speak. Your thoughts will follow. That is the trap. But there is a way out. You reclaim your language. You slow down. You examine the words you use. You question the ones you were given. You stop saying things just because they sound right and start asking if they feel true. You find new words, better ones, honest ones, and when you do, your world begins to change. You stop reacting to the old definitions. You start rewriting them. You start using language to clarify, not confuse. That is how you take your power back, not just with louder words, with clearer ones, because the person who owns their language owns their mind, and the person who owns their mind cannot be easily manipulated. Language is not just a tool. It is a weapon. It is a lens. It is a map. Use the wrong map, you stay lost. Use the right one, and you finally see where you really are. The real purpose behind the education system. You were not educated, you were trained. Let that sit for a second. Because it changes everything. From the time you were a child, you were dropped into a system that was never designed to make you wise, powerful, or free. It was designed to make you obedient, predictable, productive enough to serve the machine, but never awake enough to question it. That bell that rang every hour, that was not about learning, that was conditioning. Just like in a factory, move when we say move, sit when we say sit, speak only when spoken to, ask only the questions we allow, and never ever challenge the rules. It was never about your potential. It was about your compliance. They told you education was the key to success, but they never mentioned that the lock was one they built. The key fits only into doors they control. You were not taught how to think. You were taught what to think. Memorize, repeat, obey. And here is the part most people miss. Real education makes you dangerous. It makes you question power. It makes you unfit to be a cog. But what you got? That was domestication. You were measured by tests that rewarded obedience, not intelligence. You were punished for curiosity if it wandered outside the curriculum. You were made to feel dumb if you learned differently, or bored if you learned too fast. Because the system does not care about learning. It cares about control. Ask yourself this. How many things did you memorize in school that you actually use today? How many critical skills were skipped completely? How to manage money, how to regulate emotion, how to think critically, how to recognize manipulation, how to lead, how to find purpose. They left all of that out, on purpose, because if you know how money works, you are harder to trap in debt. If you know how to think independently, you are harder to manipulate. If you know who you are harder to break. And the system is not built to handle individuals. It needs uniformity, so they train you just enough to follow instructions, just enough to participate, just enough to chase grades, promotions, titles, but never enough to break the game. They teach competition over collaboration, memorization over exploration, fear of failure over love of learning, because the goal was never wisdom, it was efficiency. And the result? You get adults who can follow orders but cannot question them. Adults who know how to clock in, but not how to wake up. Adults who spend more time learning how to fit in than how to be free. This is why schools look like factories, desks in rows, bells to signal movement, standardized everything. You are being molded, shaped, not into your highest self, but into a usable worker. And the worst part, you were told this was for your own good. You were told this was your only shot at success. Get the grades, get the diploma, get the job. And then what? Be miserable and afraid to admit it. That is not education. That is a long-term grooming process to make you dependent on systems that do not serve you. And here is the twist. The real education starts when you realize how much you were lied to. When you realize that school taught you more about compliance than creativity, more about fear than freedom. That is when you start learning for real. But that truth is heavy, because it means most of what you believed about success, status, and intelligence was given to you by people who never wanted you to be fully awake. That is not a failure of the system. That is the design. You were taught to chase credentials instead of wisdom, to value being correct over being curious, to silence your inner voice in favor of external validation. And then they wonder why so many people grow up anxious, disconnected, and lost. Because they were trained to be useful, not fulfilled. This is why the system celebrates memorization and punishes questioning. Why it praises conformity and ignores individuality. Because the more alike people become, the easier they are to manage. And if you step out of line, if you challenge the rules, you are labeled a problem, a disruption, even a failure. But in truth, those are the signs of someone waking up. Here is what they never told you. Real learning is messy. It is uncomfortable. It threatens the status quo. And that kind of learning does not happen inside neat little classrooms built to keep you quiet. It happens when you start asking why everything feels off. When you start wondering why school prepared you for tests, but not for life. When you start realizing that the most powerful people in the world did not get that way by following the curriculum. They got there by questioning it. That is the real education, not the one they gave you, the one you take back for yourself. Because once you see the system for what it is, you stop playing the role it handed you. You start rewriting the script. You stop memorizing answers and start asking better questions. That is when things shift. That is when you stop being a product of the system and start becoming a threat to it. The truth about freedom in modern democracies: you are told you are free. You vote, you speak, you scroll, you choose. On paper, it all sounds good, like freedom is real, like the system works. But here is the uncomfortable question nobody asks. If you are so free, why does it feel like you have no real power? Why does the world keep getting worse no matter who you vote for? Why does it feel like the big decisions are already made before you even hear about them? Because the truth is this: freedom in modern democracies is mostly an illusion, a well-packaged myth sold to keep people calm, cooperative, and distracted. You are free to choose the flavor of your chains, not to remove them. You are free within the parameters they set. You can pick red or blue. You can work for this company or that one. You can scroll left or right. You can post what you want, until it threatens the narrative. Then it gets filtered, shadow banned, labeled dangerous. So yes, you are free, as long as your freedom does not interfere with their control. Modern democracies mastered something old empires never could: how to keep people obedient without needing chains, how to make people think they are in charge while every major lever of power remains untouched. The game is subtle now. Instead of ruling with fear, they rule with choice. but only choices that lead back to the same destination. You get two parties who answer to the same donors. You get news outlets owned by the same 5 corporations. You get products made by the same exploitative systems, wrapped in different branding. That is not freedom. That is a loop. You do not live in a democracy. You live in a managed perception, a simulated sense of agency. You vote every few years, but the people who really run things, the bankers, the lobbyists, the multinational execs, they never leave. You never get to vote them out, and they never run for office, because they already own the people who do. Meanwhile, you are taught that freedom means shopping wherever you want, posting memes, upgrading your phone, swiping on apps, choosing between Netflix and YouTube. You are given 1,000 meaningless choices to distract you from the ones that actually matter. Where does your data go? Why does war never end? Who profits when prices rise? Why are you working 40 hours a week just to survive? Why do you feel trapped in a system that calls itself free? Because the reality is this: real freedom is dangerous to systems of control, and that is why it gets repackaged into symbols, flags, slogans, holidays. You are told to celebrate your freedom once a year with fireworks, while your privacy is sold, your labor is taxed, and your voice is diluted. And here is where it gets really twisted. You are conditioned to defend this illusion. You are trained to feel offended if someone questions it, to call it ungrateful, to say love it or leave it, because a system that convinces you to protect your own cage never needs guards. That is how deep the programming goes. Now let me be clear. This is not about hating your country. It is about seeing the difference between symbolism and substance, between what you are told and what you actually experience. Because if you are working a job you hate, buried in debt, stuck in systems you did not create, wondering why life feels like a treadmill, that is not freedom. That is managed existence. Real freedom is not just voting. It is understanding the game behind the votes. Real freedom is not just speech. It is access, ownership, the power to shape your own future, not just survive inside someone else's vision. And that kind of freedom, you do not get that by asking politely. You do not get it from politicians who smile while cashing corporate checks. You get it when people wake up to the fact that freedom has been diluted into branding, into optics, into controlled expressions that look like power, but are hollow inside. So if you feel like something is off, that is not just you being cynical. That is your inner truth sensing the gap between the story and the reality. Because you are not crazy for asking questions. You are not wrong for feeling uneasy. You are just waking up to the fact that if freedom has to be marketed to you, it probably is not real. Waking up to the idea that maybe the system does not want to crush you. It wants to use you, to keep you entertained enough to not revolt, afraid enough to stay dependent, divided enough to never unite. And the real threat, it is not rebellion. It is awareness. Because once enough people stop confusing comfort with freedom, once they start recognizing that choice without power is just illusion, the system starts to crack. Freedom is not something you are handed. It is something you reclaim. And it starts by seeing through the story you were sold. Not with anger, not with despair, but with clarity. Because the only thing more dangerous than losing your freedom is believing you still have it when you don't. Being awake doesn't make you happy. It makes you responsible. Everybody talks about waking up like it is some kind of spiritual trophy. Like once you see through the lies, life magically gets better. Like the truth is going to make you feel free. calm, peaceful. Let me tell you what really happens. When you wake up, the first thing you feel is grief, because everything you believed starts to fall apart, and the world you thought you knew starts to look like a theater set. All the things you trusted, the media, the schools, the leaders, the systems, they start to rot right in front of you, and suddenly, the weight of that awareness is yours to carry. Being awake does not make you happy. It makes you responsible. Because once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you know, you cannot pretend you don't. And that knowing creates a kind of pressure, a constant pull to live differently, to act differently, to speak even when it is easier to stay silent. You look around and realize most people are sleepwalking through a system designed to keep them numb, distracted, and dependent. You see people chasing validation, chasing money, chasing comfort, not because they are shallow, but because they were trained to do it. They do not know anything else, but you do, and that makes your life heavier. You cannot just go back to scrolling through nonsense. You cannot laugh at the same jokes. You cannot blindly celebrate the same holidays, obey the same rules, or cheer for the same lies. Everything is filtered now through a different lens, and it isolates you. Because now you are the one who sees the elephant in the room. You are the one who notices the manipulation buried in the headlines, the emptiness behind the smiles, the fear under the surface of normal conversations. And the worst part, you cannot force anyone else to see it. Waking up is not something you can explain in a PowerPoint. It is not a set of facts you throw at people. It is a personal earthquake, a breakdown, a stripping away, and most people will fight tooth and nail to avoid it. Because sleep is safe. Sleep is warm. Sleep feels good. Until the house is on fire. So when you wake up, you carry that fire. You carry the burden of knowing the world is not what it seems. That evil wears a smile. That systems of power feed on ignorance. That most suffering is not random. It is engineered. And you are left with this question now that I see it. What do I do with it? Because truth without responsibility is just torment. You can scream about the system all day, but that does not change it. You can rage against the lies, but that does not free anybody. The real challenge is not just seeing clearly, it is living honestly, and that takes strength most people never develop. It is easier to be asleep, easier to blend in, easier to nod and smile and avoid the discomfort. But that comfort has a cost, because pretending not to know is its own kind of prison. Being awake means you have to lead where others follow. It means you speak even when your voice shakes. It means you take hits. Socially, emotionally, sometimes financially. Because truth always comes with a price. You stop asking why the world is broken and start asking where you are contributing to it. You stop blaming others and start examining your own patterns, your habits, your silence. Because being awake is not about superiority. It is about responsibility. Not the performative kind, not the virtue signaling kind, but the gritty, lonely, internal kind. The kind that says, I will be the one to break the cycle. I will be the one to hold the line. I will live with integrity even if nobody claps for it. That is the real awakening. Not the memes, not the talking points, not the YouTube rabbit holes, but the quiet choice to carry the truth without being crushed by it. And it is not glamorous. It is not fun. It does not make you popular. In fact, it makes you a problem, a disruption, a mirror people do not want to look into. But once you choose that path, you cannot go back. You may lose friends. You may lose comfort. You may lose your place in the crowd. But what you gain is something bigger, self-respect, clarity, the kind of peace that comes not from ignorance, but from alignment. You are not here to feel good all the time. You are here to be real, to evolve, to wake up not just for yourself, but for those who are still asleep and do not even know they are drowning. And sometimes, just your presence, just the way you live, speak, choose, is the invitation they need to start questioning everything too. But make no mistake, that is a heavy role. Being awake means you will walk through fire while others roast marshmallows. It means you will be called crazy while pointing out the obvious. It means you will be mocked, doubted, dismissed, until the truth becomes undeniable. And by then, you will not be bitter. You will just be ready. Because waking up is not the destination. It is the starting line. The question is, once you are awake, will you do the work that comes with it? Will you carry the weight? Will you choose truth over comfort, again and again? That is the cost of seeing clearly, not happiness but responsibility. Why the narcissism epidemic is being promoted. You ever wonder why it feels like everyone is performing now? Like people cannot even eat a sandwich or go to the gym without turning it into content. Like everything is curated, branded, filtered. Like the person they are trying to be matters more than the person they actually are. That is not just a coincidence. That is a design. We are living in an age where narcissism is not only normalized, it is rewarded, promoted, elevated as a virtue. But here is what nobody wants to admit. This epidemic of self-obsession is not organic. It is not just human nature going off the rails. It is being engineered. Because narcissistic people are easier to control. Let that sink in for a second. A society full of narcissists does not revolt. It competes, it compares. It craves attention, not freedom. It is too busy performing to notice the walls closing in. That is why the system pushes it so hard. Narcissism is perfect for consumer culture. It creates people who define their value through what they buy, what they post, how many likes they get. People who feel empty unless they are being seen. That is not accidental. It is profitable. If you convince people their worth depends on their image, you never have to sell them a product. You just sell them an identity, and they will do the rest. They will beg to be marketed to. They will spend hours crafting content for algorithms. They will burn themselves out trying to look successful, even if they are dying inside. And the entire machine keeps turning. Now here is where it gets darker. Narcissists do not build communities. They build brands. They do not cooperate. They compete. They do not ask deep questions. They avoid them, because the surface matters more than the substance. That is exactly what a control system wants. You cannot have a revolution if everyone is busy trying to be a celebrity. You cannot challenge the system if you are obsessed with being accepted by it. So what does the system do? It feeds that obsession. It gives you apps that reward vanity. It gives you media that glorifies ego. It gives you influencers who teach you how to fake it better, how to be louder, shinier, more admired. Never how to be deeper, wiser, more grounded, because grounded people cannot be easily manipulated. They are not chasing external validation. They are not buying into every trend. They do not need 10,000 strangers to tell them they are enough, and that kind of self-possession, that is dangerous. So instead, the culture promotes the exact opposite. Teach people to obsess over their image, over their status, over their follower count. Make them insecure about aging, about failing, about not being seen. Then tell them the solution is more content, more attention, more applause. But here is the catch. Narcissism is never satisfied. It always needs a new hit, a new compliment, a new spotlight. It is a black hole that cannot be filled. And that emptiness, it is what makes it so easy to exploit. Now, this does not mean everyone posting online is a narcissist. That is not the point. The point is that the system encourages you to think like one, to act like one, because narcissism keeps you looking outward, never inward. It keeps you in a loop of seeking approval, not seeking truth. And if you never seek truth, you never question power. You become predictable, programmed, easy to market to, easy to distract, easy to control. Now ask yourself, who benefits from that? Do you think it is a coincidence that self-obsession exploded at the same time privacy disappeared? At the same time real connection got replaced with likes and shares? At the same time people stopped thinking critically and started thinking virally? This is not random. This is a strategy. A narcissistic society is a docile one because it is so busy looking at itself in the mirror. It never looks up and asks who built the room it is standing in. That is the game. Create emotional addicts who need constant attention. Feed them symbols of status. Make them believe they are unique, while making them act exactly the same. Sell them the illusion of individuality, while robbing them of depth, and worst of all, make them proud of it. Proud of being self-absorbed. Proud of being provocative. Proud of being controversial, as long as it gets them noticed. Pride without reflection. Volume without meaning. Performance without presence. And the system claps. Because as long as you are obsessed with yourself, you will never become a threat to it. Now here is the truth most people are not ready for. The opposite of narcissism is not humility. It is awareness. Awareness that you are not the center of the universe. That your image is not your identity. That your value is not based on how much you are seen, but how deeply you live. That you are not here to impress strangers. You are here to evolve. And once you tap into that, once you stop chasing applause and start chasing alignment, the system loses its grip. Because a person who is truly aware does not need to be told who they are. They already know. And that is the most rebellious thing you can be in a world that wants you addicted to your reflection. So the next time you see this culture worshipping ego, understand, it is not just annoying, it is strategic, it is a distraction, it is a trap. And once you see the trap, you do not have to step in it. How society weaponizes empathy to control you. You were taught that empathy is always good, that caring for others makes you a better person, that if you feel bad for someone, you should automatically help, no questions asked. And on the surface, that sounds right. It feels right. But what if I told you that same instinct, the one that makes you compassionate, is being used to control you? That empathy, when hijacked, becomes a weapon, one that turns your own emotions against you. Let's get real. If someone can control what you care about, they can control what you do, what you believe, what you support, what you allow. All they need to do is show you a victim, and suddenly your guard is down. You are no longer thinking, you are feeling. And when you are feeling, you are not questioning. That is the trap. Think about how many agendas get pushed using empathy, not logic, not facts, just a single emotional image, a crying child, a scared face, a tragic story stripped of all context, and boom, public opinion shifts. People donate, people march, people comply, not because they understand the situation, but because they were made to feel bad if they did not. This is not compassion. This is manipulation. When empathy becomes mandatory, it becomes control. because now you are not helping out of love. You are helping out of guilt, out of pressure, out of fear that if you do not, you are a bad person, that if you even question the narrative, you are heartless, dangerous, evil. That is how society keeps people in line, not just through laws, not just through punishment, but through emotional blackmail. They weaponize your empathy to make you obedient. And it works, because humans are wired to feel what others feel. Mirror neurons fire when we see someone in pain. But here is the kicker. Those same neurons do not know the full story. They just react. So if someone hands you a one-sided story, an out-of-context clip, a carefully crafted sob story, your body reacts before your brain has a chance to ask if any of it makes sense. And in that tiny window, you are vulnerable. That is how narratives get slipped in through the back door. Think about how media uses this. Politicians, corporations, movements, they do not need you to understand. They just need you to feel. Once they hook your empathy, your logic takes a backseat. Now you are emotionally invested in something you never questioned. And worse, now that you feel emotionally involved, you will defend it, even if it makes no sense, even if it goes against your values. Because you are no longer protecting truth. You are protecting how you felt when you first saw it. That is the game. It is not about helping people. It is about hijacking your wiring. And once you realize this, it changes how you see the world. You start noticing when you are being rushed into a conclusion. You start asking why a particular story is being pushed 24/7 while others are buried. You start wondering who benefits from your emotional reaction. Because it is always someone. Empathy without awareness is a weapon pointed at your own mind. You give your energy, your money, your voice, your vote, all because someone made you feel something, not because you actually understood what was going on. And here is the dangerous part. When empathy is weaponized, it stops being empathy. It becomes control wrapped in compassion, coercion disguised as caring. And most people never see it coming, because we have been trained to think that questioning a victim narrative is wrong, that asking for context is cruel, that withholding sympathy means you lack humanity. But real humanity asks questions. Real compassion has boundaries. Real empathy does not mean agreeing with everything that makes you feel something. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is pause and think, to ask, who is framing this? What are they leaving out? What action are they hoping I will take? And why? Because the moment you start asking those questions, the spell breaks. You start realizing how often empathy is used to justify censorship, control, violence, policies that hurt millions, all dressed up as kindness. And suddenly, things do not feel so simple anymore. You start seeing how your goodness was used against you, how your compassion was milked, how your emotions were steered by people who do not care about truth. They care about power. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This is not about becoming cold or detached. It is about becoming discerning. Empathy is beautiful. It connects us. It makes us human. But when it is unguarded, it becomes the fastest shortcut to control. So you have to protect it. You have to pair it with critical thinking. You have to remember that just because something pulls your heartstrings does not mean it is true, or just, or wise. In fact, the most powerful lies are the ones that make you feel like a hero for believing them. That is how deep the manipulation goes. So if you want to be truly compassionate, you have to be willing to pause, to ask questions, to say no even when saying yes would make you look nicer. Because real freedom means feeling empathy without being ruled by it.